Welcome everyone. It is Zimcast, and I want to say first off that thank you all for coming, and I also do want to say that this is not really my idea. This was something that's put together primarily by my co-host. You've seen him on the channel before. Awesome to have him as always. G98 Appreciator. How's it going, my man?
It's going good. Can you
Going
hear me
good.
all right?
Yep, your audio sounds fine as always, and we are not alone, as people saw by the title of the stream as well as the thumbnail itself. G98 Appreciator was able to get an interview together, and that is the man of the hour, Mr. Lee Joyner. That's how you say your name, sir?
Joyner, Joyner.
Joyner, awesome. So primarily because this is 98 Appreciators, this was the interview he set up. I will be moving away from the stream. What we're probably going to be doing is having the interview set up. People who see it live. Then we'll try to get it onto his channel. So I'm essentially just sort of the mediator here. So I will step off and let 98 Appreciator do his thing. Floor is yours,
again
Vic.
for everything.
Oh, of course.
Hello, sir. It's an honor to meet you again. Speak with you
Good
again.
to see you again. How are you doing? Thanks for inviting me.
I'm doing good. I hope you're doing well as well.
Yeah, doing good.
Yeah, and then again, I met you at I think the last Monster Palooza. Yeah, I was the guy with like the 98 puppet.
That is correct. Yep, I remember.
Yeah, it was an honor to meet you. I met also Steve Wang, Johnny, and yourself.
Yeah. Yep. It was an amazing opportunity to work with such legends like Johnny and Steve and Gino and all those people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so let's begin. First question, just to introduce yourself to anyone in the audience. What is it that you do, and how did you come to work on the 98 film?
Well, I am a special effects artist. I'm also primarily a sculptor now in Los Angeles. I moved out here in early 95 and started working and then started teaching. So I also have a school partnered with the legendary V. Neal. And that's, like a dream come true. Lost Boys and Beetlejuice and all the Hunger Game movies and Pirates films, and she's a wonderful person. So when I first started out, I was working, when I got out of school, I was working on the East Coast. I did a lot of animatronics and sculpting and skin making and mold making for theme parks and even stores. I think some of the first things I worked on were, what were they called? Showbiz Pizza. They were kind of like the Chuck E. Cheese knockoffs with the gorilla. That was when a lot of the animatronic companies were moving from latex to urethane and testing silicone. So and working and growing up on the East Coast, it was different than, say, starting my career out here, because I had to learn how to use a lot of that stuff on my own. So it's a lot of research, and it's a lot of figuring out the chemical processes and how they interact with each other, and testing a lot of things. So it was kind of cool to be on the ground floor of that. So I worked in animatronics for a couple of years, did work for Disney, did the Lion King live puppet show and stuff for Six Flags and events all over the world, really. And then came out here and started working. I didn't work with Patrick Tatopoulos, who Patrick Tatopoulos designs, until I think we started working on Godzilla, I don't know, 97 maybe. Mm-hmm. It was after I had worked, I had a big project before that working with Guillermo del Toro on his first American film called Mimic, about a giant cockroach creature, which was a lot of fun. Got to work with Rick Lazzarini and his crew, which I'd worked with before on the Budweiser Frogs commercials, if you remember those. A lot of people don't, but they were really cool. Stan Winston did them first, and then Rick took over. And when it came to Godzilla, I think someone had told me they were looking for people. And myself and my ex-wife, Amy, had sent in our paperwork because she was working in the industry too, and went in for an interview, and they hired us, and actually hired her before they hired me, and then went in and started doing R&D, and then got on the sculpting team, and then was over there. I don't know. We worked on that project. At least I was on that project for 5 or 6 months. It was a lot of work. I mean, it was probably, that movie is special for the LA effects industry because it was I think the last big creature suit film. There was CG in it because I remember I took over some of the pieces to have them scanned in Pasadena with Jose Fernandez, incredible sculptor, owns what is it, Ironhead Studios now. He does a lot of all the superhero movies. An incredible sculptor, really nice guy too. I learned a lot from him, and of course working on that project, like you said, with Steve Wang, but there were some legendary people like Gino Acevedo from Weta, who Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. Jim Cagle sculpted or the sculptor for Killer Clowns from Outer Space and Chucky. Worked with Dave Grasso from Stan's shop. Mark Maitre, another one from Stan's shop. Gabe Bartalos in the mold making department. It was incredible. You've got a great collection of artists when Steve Wang was not the lead painter. He was working under the aegis of Gino. Gino was doing a lot of the R&D and the testing, and Steve came in and they had the tents. We were in like a giant aircraft hangar, and they had this tents outside to paint all the suits, and that was Steve in charge of that. Just some amazing people. Jake Garber, who replaced what's his name? KMB. There's Howard Berger, Greg Nicotero on Walking Dead. It was wonderful to work on. It's funny, a lot of the projects you work on when you work in the stuff I do, it's not necessarily, when you first get in, you're like, wow, I want to work on this movie and that movie and that movie. But you find that a lot of the movies that you do, they don't turn out like you thought they would be, like Godzilla, but other ones, or they might never get released. So it becomes more of what you have in memories and the people you meet, and things you learn, and things you're proud of. So, in a long-winded response to your short question, it was just a natural process. I had worked on a lot of other shows, and like Stargate SG-1 over at Todd Masters, and then I was doing some of my own work as well for galleries and for maquettes and model kits. Back then, garage kits were a big thing. They're not as much anymore. Magazines like Model Kit Builder and Kit Builders, which were great. And I was selling a few of those locally. You could just go into the stores in Hollywood, the hobby stores, and they would have bins of, awesome, rare to find now, sculptures that people would make out here and then just try and sell them as much as they could. But yeah, that's the story.
Oh, cool. So you started out like towards the beginning of the project.
I was there. We were doing R&D. Yeah, we were. Yeah, the sculptors were given little pieces of clay, little like flat boards, and you were supposed to work out texture and shape. Because when they first brought us in, the sad thing about that show, but it's how it is on these big projects, you couldn't take pictures. They would check your bag going in, check your bag leaving. That was a big issue. Nowadays, it's, still serious, and you could ruin your career or affect the actual box office of the production. A lot of these Marvel shows, if someone were to something, it could make fans angry, and then you lose billions or millions of dollars with people not showing up or waiting, pirated or something. But when they brought us all in, we didn't know the design, didn't see it. We just knew it was Godzilla. And Jake had sculpted the first maquette of Godzilla with her up around a building. I think it was the Empire State Building, but I can't remember. And she was kind of holding it and then roaring. And we were like, wow, blown away with Patrick's design. And then, we just got a table and started working.
And so that's how you were revealed the design yourself, was with that one statue, right?
Exactly. It was like it was covered, and they pulled it off, and we were all standing there. All meaning I think there might have been 15 or 20 of us, or less. I don't know. I mean, they had some other people in there that were sculptors that were not from the effects industry. They were mannequin sculptors, and they were incredible artists. But we ran into some issues because some of these sculptors were not from the industry, so they had a different sensibility and approach to the philosophy of the sculpting in the effects industry, whereas they didn't want to take advice from the sculpting boss. We had the baby and the adult team. It was Mark Maitre and Tully Summers, and the lead was Jim Cagle. That's why the baby looks a little different in style in regards to the adult, because it was Jim, and Jim's such an incredible sculptor, and he also has a really strong style. But he was the lead, and then on the adult was Jose Fernandez, and on that one we had a couple of mannequin sculptors, because I think Jose was looking for more. He's very much a traditional guy in regards to his style. Not saying traditional in a bad way, but traditional as in some of the original beautiful sculptors of human history, like Da Vinci and Michelangelo. So his flow and his movement and his emotion when it comes to his sculpture was not necessarily creature based. It was more reality based, and that was wonderful to learn from. But yeah, it was great.
Mm-hmm. And how familiar were you with the character of Godzilla?
Oh,
And what was your initial reaction to the redesign?
very familiar. Redesign, I liked. Technically, it was gorgeous. It had Patrick had done. They were working on designs of that time, and Patrick was in his office on a movie called Soldier. They had this giant robotic snake creature that lived in the. They had this dump planet where all the trash was dumped on it, and so it lived in there and fought. But I think they cut it out of the film, or maybe they never built it. I'm not sure, because that was after. But if you saw Super Mario Brothers, the movie, he sculpted or designed that. Sorry. Working over with Alan Apone at Makeup Effects Labs, which was my very first job in LA. Alan hired me for a movie called Spy Hard, where I sculpted a velociraptor, which I just posted on my Instagram.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and I had seen, I saw up in the top office area, design area, these hand drawn, beautifully colored designs from Super Mario Brothers, and the King Koopa has that same chin. If you see the movie, it looks very similar. So it had a lot of those aspects to it. He explained it to us, and Toho fully supported him, obviously, because they had wanted to, or at least Stan Winston had bid on the project. And I'm sure you've seen the designs they sent for that.
Yeah.
They were highly detailed, but still the traditional upright creature. Yeah, so I loved working on it. I loved doing realistic stuff, and that's again where I was kind of, you going into it, you're not sure how people are going to react, and you have a lot of people that don't like it, and a lot of people that do like it. I think that's with anything. You look at Star Wars recently. Anytime you go back and you change the design or the story or so on, you're going to get emotions. But we loved it. Yeah.
And then for the film, explain to the audience, what did you work on for this film?
Sure. I was on the adult suit, as well as the 6th scale large, for when it, I think it maybe vomits fish out, or it was on the bridge and it was caught and biting cars and other things. They did a huge 6th scale animatronic, so I worked on that, and then worked on the I think it was the 24th scale, which was the scanning model. It's been a while, so I forget the numbers. So I was working on that with Tom Flouts. He did most of it. We sculpted it on a mirror, which is how they used to do automotive prototypes. And then it was scanned in, so the CG artist could be working on that as a placeholder until we got a more defined sculpture, which we could scan in and replace it with. And that was back in the infancy of
Mm-hmm.
scanning, and they would do back then. It wasn't 3D printing; it was CNC milling. So you would get these large, big cubes of polyisosanurate bun stock. So it's this yellow dense foam. It's kind of like a harder version or orangish, harder version of floral foam. And then they would put it with the big CNC machine, and it would mill out, the shapes, and then you take it and you sand it down, then grind it and paint. So that's what we would do. That's what we did for the big one, and that was sculpted down to its waist, and the
Mm-hmm.
arms were straight out. And again, we needed that aircraft hangar big. I've got a picture somewhere. That was a problem when we went to pick up our pictures. That's why we're like, okay. They said you'll get pictures at the end. They only allowed us to get like 4 pictures or 5 pictures,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of how much work we did. That was pretty tough.
Yeah.
So you collect magazines and hope you see pictures online and do screenshots and so on. But when you're spending, half of a year working on something, you hope you can get a little more than that. But that was their limit for whatever reason they chose.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
on the suits, sorry, I was getting back to your question. On the suits and the large one and the small scanning model, I was working on the tail, the feet, the claws. I worked on the head, doing more of the plate work, a lot of the nails, the claws, wrinkles, just texture, lots of different things.
Mm-hmm. I see. And so you said you worked on the big one and then the smaller 1/24th maquettes.
Right, and
Can
then
you
the suit
explain?
as well.
Oh, suit.
Mhm.
Can you go into what are the differences that come with sculpting on a large scale um, animatronic versus a smaller scale
Sure.
maquette?
Well, the large one was done last. So
Mm-hmm.
I had gone from the maquette to the suit to the huge one. So you pretty much know what you're doing by the time you get to the big one. But you have to wear, like we wore these really expensive air feed helmets because you don't want to breathe that dust. So you had air provided and a big helmet, and it would, keep a positive pressure in there so no dust got in. You're wearing a Tyvek suit to keep the dust from getting all over you. And on either on the ground or up on scaffolding.
Mm-hmm.
When you're working, on the other ones, you can sit on a stool and relax. So on the big one, and you're working on a different material. It's like a crunchy foam. So you're grinding and you're carving, and then they would come back and coat it either with just a sealer or clay, and then refine it, and then and do more work there.
Mm-hmm. And then what about when it comes to like sculpting on the details, like how big do you have to go or
Well,
downsize
there's an
it?
interesting story about that because when we started sculpting on the suit, our we had a big talk about it, and the approach was you have to sculpt this to make it look like it is huge, even
Mm.
though it's a suit. You have to picture the camera, tiny, flying amongst the plates and the texture, and so you had to have that in the back of your mind or in the front of your mind all the time. You had to. It was That was pretty intense because you're doing a lot of refining, and Jose would switch the team up. I think there were 4 or 5 of us on that sculpture until we cut it up, and then you refine it more, and then you mold everything separately. But yeah, you had to have a different mindset. Unlike sculpting a regular prosthetic or even a maquette, it has to look huge, but it's not. It's a person wearing a suit.
Mm-hmm. And then for sculpting the maquette and everything, are there any unique references that you used for like the detail on the skin or like from
Yeah,
animals and such?
they brought in an ostrich leg. I guess it had either been killed for meat or it died naturally, and they were filming it walk um, because they actually made
Mm-hmm.
animatronic claws and feet. They actually brought in real medical prosthetics people to do the
Mm-hmm.
casting for them, and they did them out of carbon fiber, which was a big deal back then. Even though I had been working with it, with Disney in the 1994, but they ended up not using those because there was just too much to worry about when you had these actors out there running around in the suits, because they would spend I remember a whole month they were wearing the suits, all the suit performers, and they were having to learn how to live in those things. You had cameras, their faces were down here, they had like air blowing, it was just filled with things. You had to balance it because you had this long tail, and the tail was animatronic too, beautiful. I think Guy Himber might have designed it, he was in charge of the mechanics, and but I could be wrong. I think they might have even taken the motors out of the tail and made it secondary motion, which is a term we use when you tell them they're getting, you're going to throw in some free animatronics, but it's really just secondary motion of things moving because of how you designed it, which is kind of funny. But it had all these beautiful sections and all these cables. It was gorgeous with the feet and that, but the problem was the performers just couldn't keep their balance. So they had to add little kickstands to the back of the heels that they took out in post. And then I think they took off the motors for the tail as well, because it was so massive, the movement, it would throw them off balance. But yeah, what was the question again? References. So for sculpting, we would use ostriches as well as obviously iguana. But that was the part of that whole R&D period in the beginning, where we were working out who was going to work on what and what we were going to establish. I mean, Jake had established some already on the maquette, and of course, Patrick had established it in the beginning. But once you get down to that fine detail, you need to work with your sculpting team and Jake and Patrick and figure out, what we're going to end up with, which is why it took so long to make. I mean, it was a huge production, but to be honest, there were only two characters plus the eggs and the Bigfoot, when I guess the guy has the camera and it's standing between the toes. That was a real size. And then they did a 1-to-1 of the inside of the mouth. Christopher Robbins, I think, sculpted it. And then there was a tip of the tail, was sculpted 1-to-1. Yeah.
Yes. And then you mentioned before you got to see like the performers in the suits. What were you able to like see like the test footage of how the suit moved? And could you explain what you saw if you did?
Well, no, I was in the lab, not on set, but we would see it all the time. And it's, you're busy sculpting and doing your thing, so you leave that up to the higher ups. They know better than you do. Yeah.
Okay. And then what are your thoughts overall on how the practical effects were utilized in the final film?
I think they could have utilized them more, but back then CG was, a new thing, and it was allowing them to really learn how to work in coordination with the maybe a game or the CG department that's doing the computer graphics or so on. But there was a lot left in there. I think the large scale one, the 6 scale, could have been utilized a lot more because it was amazing in person with the movements. That thing was over on the Sony lot in Culver City for years and years and years after they finished, just rotting. And I don't even know, they probably scrapped the whole thing. I don't even know if the animatronics are still around.
Well, funny enough, I remember hearing stories about how it was like disintegrating on the lot. But apparently I do believe some skin survived and it was sold on auctions. I actually have a piece that I was able to match to the big animatronic.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and then I also have a piece of material that I think is from the suit, like cut off material that you would cut when you did.
Yeah, like a bi-weave black fabric that stretches.
No, just like the rubber skin, I guess, or whatever you were using for it.
Yeah, send me a picture of that. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, actually, I might just bring it up real quick. I'll be right back. I have it right here. And so here, like I have this piece, like just like a little piece of skin.
Oh yeah,
You can see that.
that's
And then
awesome.
this is just like a tiny one, like just
Oh,
a
that's
piece
really
of
cool.
production made skin.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I have those. I love
awesome.
just collecting props and stuff.
Sure, who doesn't?
Hmm.
I do too.
And I guess just for fun, like if you could like own a prop from the film, like what would it be?
Hmm. Um, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, obviously everybody wants the heads. I know Patrick had the heads mounted in his house, or at least I think the adult head. The head's always fantastic, but one of the plates I worked on, those are really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know, maybe a foot, because I love the shape of the feet and how they worked out. Um,
Mm.
Maybe even a cast of the inside of the mouth, because I think Tom Flouts maybe um, did the initial design on that, which they based on a snapping turtle, as well as other things. But if you look at Godzilla's mouth, she has these points on the edge of her tongue, reaching all the
Mm.
way back. And I always thought that was really cool. Yeah, anything really. I mean, I'd be
Mm.
happy.
Yeah,
You
I
don't
I
get
would love
a
to.
lot of copies of things you work on out here. So,
Yeah, I would love to own like one of the rubber fish they had. Just
oh,
for fun.
yeah, I wouldn't mind having the initial maquette of the egg. I think
Mm.
Gino sculpted that, and then Gino did the big one. I first met Gino over at K&B when he was doing the Spawn movie, and he was using that same technique on the Spawn suit. I came over and visited them when he was sculpting it, and he used that same technique where he would use a torch and heat the clay, and then you hit it with air, and it spatters out, and that's why the outside of the egg has all that
Mm-hmm.
beautiful webbing type look to it. Which is funny
Yeah.
because when I was working on Mimic, we did these Uthikas, which were the same thing. It was like this egg sac they were in, and we had to make movement inside, and we had to rotocast them with a SC. It was a translucent urethane material. Problem was, any translucent urethane, maybe even now, or clear urethane, it will sag over time,
Mm-hmm.
especially. So
And then you mentioned that you worked on stuff for the feet, tail, and then some claws.
yeah,
And then talking to
all the
Johnny,
claws.
I
I think I
I
did all the
believe.
claws.
Uh-huh.
So.
Johnny told me that he worked on molding for I think the claws and stuff like that. Did
Yeah,
you?
that was he and Clay Martinez and Gabe and a bunch of great mold makers over there.
Mm-hmm. And then I wanted to get Johnny on here for a second, but he couldn't make it because I wanted to
Oh,
like ask about like, was there any communication between the sculptors and the molders, and like what kind of process would that look like?
well, yeah, you have departments. We had the foam department, you had the mechanical department, you had the painting department, you had the sculpting department, you had the mold making department, the casting department. But it was all in a giant open area because it was in a airplane area
Mm-hmm.
down in Culver City. I don't think we were on the Sony lot for that. I think it was somewhere. But yeah, usually we'll just finish, and that's what Jake's job was. Jake Garber, he was the art production coordinator, so the art side. So he would, come over and check the time and how are things going, and when do we need to do this, and when do we need to have that completed. And sometimes you would send things over, and they might get damaged during the mold making process. So if it's something that's a little complicated, they would call a sculptor over, or
Mm-hmm.
talk to Jake and so on. They really didn't want the departments to intermingle in regards to making up their own minds in regards to the schedule. Like, hey, we need you to do that. Can you come do that? Well, we might be working hard against a crunch time on something we have to finish. So there was one time where I sent over the plates to be molded, the big fins, where I had spent, I don't know, 2 months. I don't know how long I worked on them. Dave Grasso sculpted them initially, but just with all the rake marks, and there was no texture. It was just the form. And then I took over and refined them and did all of the texture that I designed, which was very subtle texture. And when we took it over, or when they were being molded, they had sprayed them with PVA, which is a sealant we use before. They used epoxy syntactic dough and epoxy resin and fiberglass to do the molds, because you're baking them. You need a high temp material, but it's got to last. It's got to be lightweight. And it was fairly new at the time as well. but they had sprayed on too much PVA, then let it sit too long, and it shrank, so it lifted up, and which is not a problem. I can come back in, or anybody can, and cut away, peel that off, just clean up anything, and they can um, spray it. But they didn't tell us, and they just molded them like that, and all
Mm-hmm.
of them were very upset in the sculpting department, and it caused a little bit of a rift, an anger rift.
Mm.
Guys, what if we went over and broke your molds and didn't tell you, and then you got blamed later? It's just and you spent all this time working on molds. Every department is super critical and important, but sadly, sculptors have the reputation of being arrogant and thinking they're
Mm.
better than everybody else because they tend to make more money and so on. So sometimes there can be a little bit of tension, but you just have to handle it properly. That was probably the most tension on the show, except when everybody was buying Ducatis because they were getting paid so much. And I know Jim Leonard had a miniature Ducati, and then he was the mold making department head. They were all racing them out in the parking lot, and then Jim had wiped out and broke his collarbone on the production, which is pretty crazy. He was in a sling.
Mm.
But that was the only tension time I can remember, to be honest. And it was over fairly quickly. But
Mm.
Jake put an end to it, and he's like, "Guys, just let me handle it. It's going to be fine."
I see.
Yeah, and he took care of it.
And then I guess
So
like
sadly, a lot of the close-up shots of that on the magazines and so on of the
mm.
plates, it doesn't represent what Dave and I did
Mm.
in full. But again, it's a job. You go and you
Mm-hmm.
do what you can, and you try not to get emotional about
Mm-hmm. Um
it.
do you have any other interesting stories about working with your team and what the atmosphere was like on the set?
Oh, the atmosphere was fantastic. Jose is where he would always play music while we're working on things, and he would always play 70s disco. So I learned to love disco. And he showed me a lot of tricks and tips and techniques, which were wonderful. There was some tension with some of the other sculptors that didn't want to take direction well. But again, they weren't from the industry. Um, let's see. It's a lot of work, a lot of time put into it, a lot of effort. And really, the memories I have are just interacting with a lot of the other artists, and just being happy and feeling humble being around them because I was unknown. I'd only been out there for a few years. And, I'm sure I was making less than a lot of the other people, but they deserved it. They had come from Stan's shop and Rick Baker's shop, and they were legends to me. So for me, it was more, wow, I can't believe I'm here. I'm this
Mm-hmm.
punk redneck from Alabama that just wanted to do this stuff maybe at some point in my life if I ever could. But I'm autistic, so I guess I tend to create rabbit holes, as in I have laser vision. I focus on something and I make it happen, but I don't, to me, it's normal. But
Mm.
to allistics or normal people, I don't know, I just would never stop. I'm always sculpting, I'm always pushing, and I love this industry with a passion, and I love the people in it. And in regards to working on Godzilla, gosh, I mean, we had I think it was Sabina. Yeah, sadly she passed, but she was in the mechanical department. Wonderful lady. She fell through the ceiling because they were up in the top, like where the foam is run. It was lower, it was like an office space type thing, so you had the false ceiling. I remember one day, I think it was Sabine, she fell through the ceiling into the foam room, but didn't
Mm.
hurt herself, which was great. Our foam runner, Richard, sadly committed suicide. um, Jumped in front of a train. Not because of the film, obviously, or the project, just because of life. I mean, a lot of us artists tend to have issues. That's why we're artists. We just can't necessarily fit in a regular desk environment, and we're tend to be more creative than not. So we also tend to have issues with that. But I mean, God, come on, getting to know Johnny Psycho and Steve Wang and Patrick and all those people. I mean, Jim Cagle. I'm friends with those people now, and it's with the pandemic, and I've been working with schools for the last decade or more, and so I haven't been in the industry as much. I just do projects on my own, on the evenings and weekends when if they'll allow me to work on stuff at home, because a lot of them don't work at nights, and I am able to do that, but not as often as I would like. But yeah, geez, let's see other stories. We would always have the tool guy come once a week. I think it was Thursday. I don't know. And he had a big truck, like those Snap-on trucks where they sell tools and like for cars, and they lay out the table with all this. But they would have sculpting tools and dental tools and mechanical stuff, and we'd all go out there and peruse. Patrick would let us all go out and get what we needed. Let me see. I can't remember. We didn't have any fires. Nobody got shot or stabbed. Nobody got in a fight. But just, I mean, come on. On the adult, I worked side by side with Craig Reardon. I mean, Craig is a legend. Craig went on set and did a lot of the work. I was the only guy on set for The Incredible Melting Man, one of Rick Baker's first films. And he was on set doing that when Rick was doing Star Wars on set with the Cantina. Craig worked with some of the most amazing people. He did Twilight Zone, the movie with Rob Bottin. And so I knew all about Craig and got to meet him. And I was able to bring a lot of these guys into the school and later on. Yeah, it was really just more the interaction with other people that I had idolized since I was a kid. Because I read everything I can about the industry. I just did a post on Mari Cederman, who did Orson Welles' makeup on Citizen Kane, a kind of lost to history artist. But, I feel it is important that we keep promoting these people so they don't get lost to the dustbin of history like you're doing. And I appreciate that because if we don't do it, nobody will. And a lot of these guys are so humble, and to them, it's just a job, as you've probably seen when you talk to people. It's, I don't know, it's just a job. It's a thing, but eventually people retire, people pass on, they go into hiding like Rob Bottin, and you need to document this stuff.
And so Godzilla 98 is going to be turning 25 this year. How do you look back on the movie and working on it?
Well, it was one of the highlights of my career so far. I mean, I've worked with a lot of amazing people like Joel Harlow and on Star Trek, and Scott Collins on the Orville, and I've been just Todd Masters and a lot of people. I'm just fortunate to have done that. But the movie itself, I think the weakest part of the film was the script to me, and that's what everybody felt. We didn't think it would be as comedic as it was, but I think the directing was great. I still love the creatures. I still think they hold up wonderfully. I think it would be a wonderful kaiju film today. It doesn't have to be Godzilla to still really represent what we can do, and I think it paved the way for a lot of the more current kaiju films, to be honest. It was the first big American. I mean, you could go back to King Kong, I guess, and some of the other ones, but the giant lizard destroying a city. I mean, and the fact that it's Godzilla, it was great. I had fond memories. I'm happy that I worked on it, and yeah, nothing really negative from it.
That's glad to hear, especially being a fan of this movie. There's a very niche community who see this film as like a cult classic to us. Yeah, and
yeah, I have no idea what if I sat down and showed a younger person today that film, what they would think, because I look at it through my tinted glasses of having worked on it. But yeah, I'm glad that people appreciate it.
Yeah, it was my first Godzilla film, and since then it's been my favorite. I've watched all the movies, and it's just a great way to be introduced to the character, I think. And a lot
Yeah.
of people in the community share that same story, where it
Well,
was
that's
their
good.
first.
Yeah, it had amazing scenes and cinematography, and the pacing was good, and the acting was wonderful. I personally, I just felt that the script could have been better with the amount of money they were spending on it. But
Hmm.
and you know, I don't know. They did the cartoon after,
Hmm.
which was cool, and the toys, which were neat. You know, I'm always looking at them, trying to see, you know, how they reproduced what we did and where they cut corners. And some of the work they've done on the reproductions have been just amazing, really well done. But then other people, you know, because we were working on it for so long and we designed it, a lot of the techniques and the approaches, you know, you're like, oh, well, I see what they were going for, but they didn't quite get it. And, you know, but you just gotta move on.
Looking back on the design, is there anything you would have changed yourself personally about it?
On the total design,
Yeah.
um, huh. I mean, God, you had the best people in Hollywood, not including me, that were working on that and doing amazing work. I don't think so, because with what Stan had done with their approach was gorgeous. I loved it. I'd love to see a film with. It's kind of. I love the new design too, and I love the filmmaking approach as well, to make it look huge, and they're not afraid to obscure it with dust and have it disappear, kind of like how they did in Alien, where you don't see the creature really
Hmm.
until, you know, later on in the film. That's why I think a lot of people think it's so smooth, possibly. But again, remember, we were going with the explicit approach of refining the texture to make it more realistic. If it was huge, you know, the size of a building, you necessarily wouldn't have giant, thick, overlapping things and big fat belly. And um, no, I don't know. Maybe tone down the iguana on the
Mm.
face a little bit, or the neck, possibly, or maybe had done something interesting and brought something new to it in regards to the neck. Maybe had bladders or something interesting when it was doing the energy and blasting. You could have had, I don't know, there could have been something interesting there. But
Hmm.
and who knows? Maybe they had thought about it, and for you know, much smarter people than me decided not to. But all in all, because you have to realize, when you're designing a creature suit, you also have to take into consideration logistics of how it's going to operate, everything that actor is having to wear, how it has to move, how it is shot, how it's painted, how it's lit. Um, Yeah, I remember when Gino was designing the paint scheme for the big plates and the fins on the back. He used a iridescent purple, if I recall, or
Hmm.
bluish color, purplish. Gorgeous, but it was so unique. It was so different, you know. And that's, to see these geniuses in their element. Literally, I mean, Gino and Steve and Jose and Jim, they are one of a kind out of 7 billion people. Doesn't mean there aren't talented people out there, but it is literally like working on a team with Da Vinci or with
Mm.
Michelangelo. Um, and to watch them work and learn so much from them, that was incredible. So I wouldn't dare second guess anything they decided, because it just seemed natural, because it was so well thought out. I don't know. Is there anything you would change about the design?
Looking back on it, I guess just in terms of like making it look more like Godzilla, maybe something with the spines, maybe the shape of them, you know?
Yeah, maybe more.
That's about it.
Would you want to go more upright with the creature, like the traditional one, or still have it more leaning forward like a
I don't
dinosaur?
think so. Keeping it leaning forward,
How would
just
you have done
sticking with that.
the plates, the fins?
I would just make them, I guess, more traditionally shaped, because with this one, the fins on the sides are the dominant ones, where traditionally it's the middle one. So maybe something like that.
Oh, so more about the actual like positioning of the sizing and
Yeah,
maybe the
maybe.
dimensions. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
I
Yeah,
love it all the same.
when Patrick and Dave Grasso were working out the fin shape, Patrick wanted it, or maybe David did. I can't remember. Patrick went along with it and he loved it. He wanted to create something that looked like frozen fire. And then my job was to come in and make it look like bone or antlers or plates. So I had to design a method of sculpting where I could create these very thin but kind of chaotic, a little bit, growth plates, and how they would. Boy, I spent so much time on those growth plates. But it was worth it. It was a lot of fun. I still have that tool. I still have my Godzilla sculpting tools because I had to make specialized tools, a hammer and a Dremel, and like for the wrinkles and then for the scraping, going down to fine level. So yeah, I mean, when you're in the middle of it, you're not really thinking about the design aspect of it. You know what I mean? You're thinking, well, you are, but you're not questioning, at least I wasn't, the decisions that were made in the initial design. So you're the first person I've heard that from in regards to the positioning. I have to go back and look at that. I didn't even do that research then. It was more, this is what we're doing. Let's go with it. But he did show us, I think, or we saw the Stan's design. I think Stan's plates were a lot more, they had like, finger protrusions, and they were more craggy looking, I guess. Oh, there's Joey Orozco. Look at that. A young Joey. God. Joey. Yeah, see, it's got those on that last photo. It's got those heavy. Yeah, see on the left there. See, they're a lot more spiky. And they're smaller at the base attachment. God, look at that musculature. Wow. Man, that would have been insane to see. Look at the personality in that face. I am a huge fan of the original. A huge fan. God, look at that. That's gorgeous. So much personality. And I remember Patrick showed it to us, and he was like, yeah, it's gorgeous. They loved it. They asked me to, I think he said Toho asked them to go in a different direction, or, just see what these like, and they loved it. Could have been a price thing too, combined with that. I don't know. But Patrick ended up getting a lot of people from Stan's shop and from Rick Baker's shop. So, you got the same level of talent there. You just got a different person in charge. Yeah, Joey is a huge hero of mine. He did the work with ADI for the new Predator film, where they made it where it's against the Native Americans. And that blows my mind. I got to see him working on that in person. Alec introduced me to him, and he's one of the few people I haven't worked on a production with, and I would love to. See, that's the thing. Now I'm like, I just want to work with that person or that person. I don't care what the project is, because you just admire their work so much. Because I never worked at Stan's. Yeah, that's gorgeous. Look at that.
Yep.
Yeah, you sculpt it in full, but you have the armature is important too, because you have to cut it apart and mold them separately, or we ended up scanning them before we molded them. You can see the square stock tubing in the arm there, where usually what you do is you have a clay cutting tool, which is just wire with two wooden handles, and you'll wrap it around and let it hang, and you sculpt, and then when you're ready to cut it, you just pull the wire, and then you pull out the pin, and then you just remove the sections. It looks like that's what maybe that's what they did. I don't know. Kind of looks like it. Oh, those are great photos. I've never seen those before.
Yeah, these are new, I believe. I think Stan Winston's school posted them a while back.
God, they're great, aren't they? Matt Winston and Eric Gray Litoff and all those guys, they perform such a service for the industry. I wish I had that when I was a kid. When I was young in the 80s, it was reading Fangoria and Cinefantastique and Cinefex, and then you had to go to the library. And I lived on a dirt road in an unincorporated part of Alabama on a lake, and had no access to that, none. So it's really cool to see that picture.
And I guess speaking to how you mentioned before, how you sculpted the suit and the maquette in a way to make it look big. And then we talked about how like this film was one of the first times like America depicted a giant creature. Could you like expand more on like how you made it look something that was gonna be like 100 feet tall?
Well, it's pretty simple. You use really small tools.
Mm-hmm.
So you're working on something huge with small tools, which normally you might do at the end for refinement, but we were doing it sooner. So it took us longer to complete. Um, but it was a psychological approach, which you kind of have to get into the skin of it, or into the mind of the creature. You know, when you're working on it, the natural aspect of what if it really existed in life. We're not just automatons that go in there and do exactly what we're told. They bring us in because we do have a style, and we do have thoughts and suggestions. And Patrick and Jake were wonderful, and so was Jose at trying things out. And if it worked, great. If not, we're not going to do it. We'll do this. Or if you're not working out great in one area, they'll move you to another area on the sculpting. You know, they'll try you out in different areas. I would say one thing thinking about it that I do appreciate about Stan's and I do appreciate about the new design is it had the feeling of gravity to it. The other designs did. Ours was a little more. There was a lot of gravity in the skin sagging in certain areas and the wrinkling, especially the wrinkling. The folds were important, like around the back of the legs, around not really the arms as much. More on the back of the legs and the tail, and some areas where there were larger wrinkles. But Jose has such a beautiful approach to the way he sculpts wrinkles and how they fold. That was there. But I think I would have liked to have seen a little more of the gravity effect, because if you think about it, this is not a normal creature. This is an aberration, but it's still fighting against the same gravity that everyone else is, right? And the bit higher you go, the
Mm-hmm.
stronger you've got to make the foundation of the building. So, it could, but I understand you also want to give the element of speed, and it's an aquatic creature too.
Mm-hmm.
So the weight doesn't really matter, which is interesting, unless it's coming from the center of the planet, like the new King Kong film and Godzilla versus King Kong. Then you're dealing with different levels of gravity and so on. But yeah, it's just, if I were to approach it now, I'd probably sit down and write down a list of everything, that I would need to keep in mind working on it. And I would have probably spoken up more about different thoughts I had. But again, I was this, young
Mm-hmm.
kid working on it, and I was just defaulting to everybody because they obviously knew more than I did and were much more talented and skilled. So I don't know. I mean, I think I would have liked to have worked on the baby with Jim as well.
Mm-hmm.
The baby was bigger than the adult suit
Mm-hmm.
person. It had, it had to look like a baby, so it had a huge head, bigger feet, shorter tail. But so it was a little more complicated to walk in. And I think with the babies, if I recall, it was when what's the French actor who was in the
Jean
professional?
Reno.
Jean Reno, when they went down and they saw the eggs and then they saw the babies down there. If I recall, I haven't seen it in a long time. You just see more of the silhouettes and then headshots and all of that. You don't necessarily see the full body as much. And I thought that was a disservice to the design and all the work. That great team. It was Mark Maitre and Dave Grasso and Jim Cagle and Tully Summers. And they were just blowing it out of the park. I would have liked to have seen a little more focus on just the artistry of it. But again, that's oh god, there I am. Oh, they blacked out Jose there. Jose's the king. I was just
Oh yeah.
just working with him. But and that's Amy standing behind the tail there. And the foam room was kind of in the shot where I'm working on the tail. You can see that door back there in the top. That's where they fell into the foam room. And you just sit on a stool and your work.
And is this all in that hangar you said?
Yeah. Yep, it is. So you can, well, you know what? Looking at this shot, and I thought about this before, and of course you see it when they put the suit on. You needed that throat for the camera and for the head of the actor
Mm.
So you kind of did need that iguana pouch there. Yeah, that's a great shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the iguana lines on the side of the neck maybe would have done something a little different. But again, that's just my style.
Mm.
Look at that paint job. Wow, that's gorgeous. And it was interesting too because Gino did the dark coloration on the scales and the lighter color in between with the skin, which is really cool. And there's two of the large plates. That was Brian Steele. I think that might be Brian Steele with Patrick there in the suit. I could be wrong, but
In
I
the
think
suit, I think it's Kurt Carley.
Kurt Carl. Yeah, I think he was one of the first suit performers we brought in. I think because I think God, see, I can't remember. I don't know who finished their creature first, if it was the adult or the baby. But for some reason, I think it was the adult. Do you have any? There are pictures out there of the animatronic feet with the claws too. I've seen them. I just don't remember where, or maybe video of it. I don't know, or I could be confusing it with just my memory of it. But that,
If you could pull that up, Zim, that'd be cool.
yeah,
But yeah,
that
I've
was
seen
so
pictures of
awesome
it.
to see in person. Yeah, look at that. Look how streamlined. I mean, and that was another thing. Obviously, this design was a lot more streamlined
Mm-hmm.
to show speed. Maybe we could have done a little less with the human musculature on the arms. I don't know. But when you're dealing with nature, the muscles are there and they're going to do things because it has to move in certain directions. That head is such a speed form. My God.
Mm-hmm. And I got to talk with Kurt Carley, the suit actor, and he spoke the same thing about like the differences between being the adult and being the baby,
Oh, really?
and how
Yeah.
different it was.
What did he
Like,
say? Like weight and balance and heat?
yeah, the balance of the babies was more difficult than the adult. I think he said
Yeah.
because they could fit a lot more mechanisms in the big head.
Yeah. Well, you see, this guy's so streamlined. I mean, looking
Mm-hmm.
at it now, and talking about it, and I didn't think about it at the time as much, or I forgot about it, but this is a creature made for water,
Mm-hmm.
maybe for speed, but yeah, that what you're looking at is one of the last, big creature suit films where they spent, millions and millions of dollars on. I mean, they still do wonderful creature suits, obviously, but this one was a huge production. A lot of people. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there, I mean, of course, even on Mimic, I think at one point we had over 100 people working in the shop. But I don't think there was this many. But you would have people come and go when their jobs were up. Yeah, that's a cool shot.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess speaking of you working on Mimic, another film I really love
Oh,
too.
that's cool.
Uh, like I guess you got to work on two films that were part of like this I guess creature feature boom of the 90s.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that and like how Godzilla played into that?
Uh, I wonder if Godzilla killed it for a while
Mm,
because they did spend so much money on it. Not killed it from box office perception, even though it didn't make as much money as they'd hoped, or there would have been sequels. Um, I, uh, I, I don't know. I mean, I was so happy. I enjoyed working on both of those productions, and again on memory and retrospect. It's not the sculpting work; it's the memories that you have with the other people you're working with. But yeah, I mean, there were other films. I mean, what was going on at the same time as Mimic was Starship Troopers over at ADI, and I mean, the industry was going from the '80s where they were making money hand over fist, and you were establishing these amazing artists and who were moving on to create their own labs, right? A lot of people, worked like Patrick and the guys from ADI and KMB, right? They were working with Stan Winston, or they were working with Rick Baker, or they were working with, other artists, and then they broke off and did their own things. Even Rick Lazzarini worked on Aliens and did the mechanics for Facehugger, and he's a mechanic, wonderful mechanic. Did Barf's ears from God, what was that movie? The Mel Brooks Star Wars ripoff.
Mel Brooks.
Oh,
I'm forgetting.
where he played the Yoda character. Hold on, I'll tell you. Spaceballs. The Spaceballs. So a lot of these people got their start then that are big now. But there's still not that many people out here doing this, because I think it takes a particular sensibility and an approach. And, a lot of people that are outside of the industry think that they could never get involved or never do this, which is why, we started Legends Makeup Academy. Is we wanted to bring in people that were Academy Award winners and people that knew what they were doing to be able to train these people. But I would think that, even in the early 90s, people were saying that CGI was going to destroy our industry. Well, what's happened? You have the Mandalorian come out with Baby Yoda with Grogu, and Werner Herzog cries on set when he sees it the first time. And, he says, if you don't use this puppet, I will not work on your project. We're doing fine. There's some amazing. This year should be really busy for us. See the light lines in between on that jaw. I mean, this one's obviously a little stretched. That's a 6 scale right there. That thing was so beautiful. God.
I wish I was that little kid.
Oh, there I am. Yeah. I was trying to find that photo. That's me with the hat. And there's Craig Reardon on the far right. There's Todd Rex. There's Mark Maitre standing next to me. I mean, there's some just, God. Is that Johnny? That might be Johnny sitting by Craig Reardon. I can't tell because I'm not sure because it's stretched. But that's the classic photo of Patrick down there with the finished one. Is it possible for you to email me a copy of that one? The one with the big sculpture? Because I can't find my copy of that picture.
Yeah, I have some photos. Zim can probably send you them. I'll definitely send you some.
Awesome. We can't
hear you, Zim, just in case.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, there we go. No, I just had that stretched out just so the image would look kind of good.
Oh no, I got you. Yeah.
I can send that to Vic, and Vic can send that to you. So that's
thank you, sir.
Unstretched.
Much appreciated. Yeah, I was looking for it and I couldn't find it because we were able to get so few photos. Patrick has all. I should probably hit him up and see if I can come by and get. I haven't even thought about that, to be honest, but I should. Yeah, that was wow. That was great. I mean,
Johnny had also told me about the molds that he made for this one and how big they were.
Yeah, they had to. It was really a holdover, although they did it before. But on Jurassic Park, they really designed that technique where you would mold it in big sections, and you would run the foam, and then you would stitch it together with the reinforcement, and then you would foam patch it, and that's how you would do it. I mean, you can see the wrinkling on the big one, the painted one behind the jaw. Those two large wrinkles, that's just foam because you need to have it free, right? For the head to move, the jaw to open, you need to have some movement there. And you can't do it if you glue it to an understructure. You have to have a missing understructure in some points that you bridge with a bi-weave stretch. So it would kind of support it like a trampoline, but it could also bend and move. And I never noticed that before. It's weird. It's cool. This is helping me see a lot of things I have never seen before.
Yeah,
like that. See the moving. I mean, that was probably the reason for the throat. Because again, that was a totally. Has there ever been a foam latex recent creature that big? I mean, it's animatronic.
Well, yeah, I think we mentioned before that like this was one of the last movies to do these big animatronics, other than the Jurassic Park franchise. And they just recently started doing them again for the
exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like with animatronics coming back into its heyday, because the directors love to. Guillermo trained, was a graduate of the Dick Smith program. Shout out to that, which is highly recommend everyone go check out if they want to get into the industry and do effects work. The Dick Smith program is the best in the world. Learning from those guys over there is just incredible. Andrew and his CCE company. What they do with that is amazing. But yeah, it's with the Jurassic Park, they've been slowly introducing more of the puppets or a big static creature, but it's breathing.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see this kind of animatronics again. The actors want to see it, the directors want to see it, and the public wants to see it. I mean, you guys answer this question. Did you cry from any of the CG creatures in Avatar getting killed or in Lord of the Rings getting killed? No, except for Gollum. Gollum was amazing. But I could tear up from watching Kermit the Frog hop around on the screen because it's a physical character that you emotionally connect with. And they're fighting against that uncanny valley in CG, and those artists that do CG work are amazing at what they do, but they're fighting and they're going uphill. It's a Sisyphean task. So I think until AI comes in and conquers humanity and takes everyone's job, which they were saying that in the early 90s, CG artists are going to take everybody's jobs.
Mm-hmm.
God, look at those. Wow. Yeah, there's the car going into the bridge. Now that was that the animatronic on the lower right, or was that
Yeah.
not? We didn't sculpt an upper one-to-one. We just did I think the lower and the teeth, maybe the lips, but not a whole head like that.
Yeah,
God,
you can
look at
actually
that.
tell right on the far right of it, you can see the spine of it down there. So they probably positioned it so they could have that
Yeah.
shot with it coming right up.
Would have loved to have been on set. Yeah, and on the upper left, you can see on my end, you can see the smaller car. God, I mean, that must have blown people that weren't working on it, maybe like producers or I don't know, people that came and visited on set to see that in person, even though it was a 6th scale. It was just incredible to see. Whoever owns that animatronic understructure, wow. I mean, it would cost so much money to recreate that.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I doubt Sony or Patrick, I don't think Patrick does, they still own the molds because at a certain point, the labs just throw their molds away.
Johnny was telling me that they did destroy the molds and they had to get like these big compressors,
Yeah,
like
because
from
it was
junkyards, to
epoxy.
destroy them.
Yeah, because it's epoxy and syntactic dough and
Mm-hmm.
fiberglass. That's a shame, but when you think about it, you're like, why would they destroy those things? It happens all the time, because the production does not pay for storage. And
Yeah.
what they'll do is they'll leave it up to the artist. And they might say, well, you have to keep it for so on, or we'll pay for storage for so many years or whatever. But at that point, you worked on it for a year. You're sick of it. You're moving on. You're doing other stuff. To you, it's not this amazing Indiana Jones find. It's just, worked on that movie. It was fun. When Rick Baker, when he retired, he destroyed, God knows, I don't know how many percentage, but he posted a picture online. I have, because we went to his garage sale when he was selling his prosthetics and other stuff. But yeah, they just throw them away. I've thrown away so many things over the years, but I'm also a hoarder and a historian when it comes to this. So I have a giant, well, not a giant, but a large storage space. Not giant like an aircraft hangar, but it's large, filled with molds from classic films like The Exorcist and Lost Boys and Benjamin Button and Mrs. Doubtfire and Hook and The Hunger and all of these things that were going to either be sold at auction or thrown away. And I said, we're not going to let that happen. So we took over, and he donated a lot of it, and we bought some from him. We didn't want it to go to people that might not appreciate it or might just throw it away, or not throw it away, but keep it in their room, which doesn't help anybody. So I'm kind of sad, but I understand the technical and logistical aspect of keeping those giant molds. And now maybe the bodysuit. Did Johnny tell you if the baby or the bodysuit, if those molds were destroyed?
I don't know about the small suits, but I know that like sections of like the skins and like maybe some molds have popped up on auction sites and such. because like in this small niche community, we have like Facebook groups or Instagram chats, and we share like the memorabilia we have of the
Yeah.
film. You know, like I have a piece of skin, some of the rubble from like the miniatures I have, and like I see also like molds of the eggs and stuff like that. You'll
Oh,
see it pop up.
the small egg, like the
Yep,
maquette. Oh, okay.
those small ones. Yeah.
Huh. So I have a feeling then that Patrick sold off a lot of things at auction. You do that when you get to a point. I mean, why not take a few $100,000 and not have to pay for storage? And hopefully it'll go to people that respect it and want to keep it. Like if I were to
Yeah.
sell anything that I have, I would want it to be to someone like you that cares about this and would take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
I have V and I own all of Dick's molds from The Exorcist. I've even got the tongue mold, which is amazing. We have foam latex from it and all of that. And it's just, God, just letting go of that. It's so tough.
Yeah.
I have stuff from Mimic. And I think Rick's lab burnt down after the film. And I don't even know if he has any of his molds. Have you ever seen a collectible come up that was of a mold or a raw cast or anything? Like a painted piece or anything from Mimic?
For Godzilla?
No, Mimic.
Mimic, huh? I haven't seen anything myself.
I haven't either.
I'm
So
not as into that as Godzilla.
I don't know. I think a lot of that was burned up in that fire,
Mm.
Which is a shame. But fortunately, I do have some pieces from that film that I'm going to hold until I'm probably 90. Yeah, if I end up expiring early, make sure you come to my estate sale because there will be some cool stuff in there.
Oh, well, God forbid,
Yeah, I know. The only thing I have from Godzilla is I have a tiny little temporary mold, silicone mold of one of the claws. So it has all of the texture that I sculpted on it. Because I did the toes and the nails on the adult out of, the texture was all done out of plaster. So we poured hydrocal and then you carved into it, kind of like carving marble, because it was so fine. Yeah, that's the only thing I have from Godzilla. I'd love to have a plate, like one of the big fins. But what do you guys as collectors call them? Fins or plates?
Well, usually we call them like dorsal plates.
Plates.
That's what we call them.
We were calling them fins because we also had plates on the body, and we wanted to, we weren't calling those scales because we tend to view scales a little more as overlapping. But yeah, that's cool. Maybe the shoulders. I don't know. Maybe we could have made the head bigger, but then you would have had to make the tail longer, and it would have been too heavy. See, you've got all that stuff you got to deal with. I mean, that people don't think.
And then one small thing I wanted to ask you is, earlier you referred to the Godzilla as a she, right, or a her?
Yeah.
And is that something you all did on the behind the scenes?
How it was written in the script, and that's how we talked about her and everything. She was a she. So if it's changed, that changed either. I don't remember the movie if they had any dialogue in it, but maybe they said she was, I don't know, what, male and female or whatever, but she was always a she, always. Not always as in other movies, but on our production, we always made her a she.
What's interesting is I know there was one video that Dean Devlin had done out where he said that Godzilla wasn't a she. Apparently there had been leaks of the script, and he was very adamant that Godzilla wasn't a she.
Maybe they thought that wouldn't play well with the fans. I don't
guess,
know,
yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, because I know in the film they say that it's a he, a very unusual he. Interestingly enough,
we sculpted genitalia.
Yeah,
Godzilla has
a big one. Yeah,
genitalia on her. So, I mean, on Mimic. Okay, if you want to hear something crazy about Mimic, if you look at, because I have a lot of pictures of the sculpture on that bug. When we first worked on it, when we were first started, we were working with Ty Ruben Ellingson, who designed a lot of the stuff for Phantom Menace. And he did these beautiful Baroque alien designs, like would fit perfectly in a Guillermo film now, right? He has a sensibility, right? Think of Pan's Labyrinth and all of that. That's how they were. But sadly, the movie was a Miramax film, and it was the Weinsteins. And they came in one day, I think it was Harvey. He came in with all his 20-year-old suit-wearing assistants and told us that it was too big. We need to see it 25% smaller. It's like, so I had to stay up all night and resculpt it. And then they came back in and said, no, it's the right size. But they brought in Rob Bottin on that. So I got to work with Rob, and they had Rob redesign everything with Ty. And then they said, we want to make it scary. And the only way they could think of making it scary was to put as many genitalia on the creature as possible. So if you go through and look at it, and I don't want to say something that might, cause problems in regards to this being posted, but
oh no, you're good. Don't worry.
You've got anal sex happening on that thing. You've got vaginas. You've got dog penises. You've got on the chest, there is a big penis going into an anus. It's huge. You got a vagina. The tongue is a sheathed penis. It is covered with this stuff. And they loved it. We're like, because we're artists, right? We're like, oh yeah, the beautiful things. And then we go to sexual organs.
I'll need to make sure just to cut that part out and just have that be. Yeah,
I don't know if you can post that, but maybe in the behind the scenes video. Yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, she had a scale lined, vagina right there at the base of her tail. So
as well as also I did get this site right here actually had a lot of the other behind the scenes stuff here.
Oh, that's at the base right there, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Gino. I remember when he was doing that. Yeah, that's when we were doing the R&D and the testing. He did so much airbrush work. Look at that. And that's James Cagle. That's a Cagle style. So you can look at the difference in the styles of the adult and the baby. That is pure James Cagle. They didn't do a maquette that I remember of the baby. There might be one, but I just don't remember it. Yep. And that gray material is the epoxy underneath in the fiberglass. Yeah. Yeah, I remember those long fingers and claws. There's Jim. That's Jim Cagle right there. Jim's amazing. He's up in Chicago now. He's worked on so many. I mean, he was Stan Winston's partner when Stan did Gargoyles way back in the day. Yeah. Yeah, you see that very linear? There's the inside of the jaw right there, that last one. See those spikes like a snapping turtle if you go back one? You can see those spikes? If you ever look and look, that's beautiful. Yeah, and Tom Flouts did so much work on this painting and sculpting, and Tom is, I don't know if he still is, but he was Doug, damn it, what's the creature performer? The best one in the world. Doug does all of Guillermo's creatures, played the Pale Man and Pan, whatever, but he was his makeup artist. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Yeah, it's a baby again. Bigger plates. Oh, that's Dave Kenlin doing the animatronics on the head. Dave now works for Apple as a designer. Oh, at least he did. He got out of the industry. And look at that giant carbon fiber head behind you. I mean, you had to do it. Carbon fiber and aluminum. And they were designing everything on and CNC milling out all the mechanical work. Scott Oshida was doing some incredible mechanical work. Yeah, look at that tail. And I don't know if anybody's talked to you about the tail of any of the creature performers, but I think they removed. See all the actuators and the movement. And I don't know if that's the baby or the adult. It's probably the adult because it doesn't look like it's. See how many? Look at that. Look how many plates there are. And you just see a subtle difference in size as it goes through. There's the baby. Yeah. Yeah. That looks like kind of how they made the feet. That are those. I don't know if those are finger extensions. Kind of look like.
Actually, I think I've seen pictures of like how you describe the feet where they crawl.
Yeah, because he had it where they could tap and they could move, but it was just too difficult for the performer to wear.
Yeah, I think there is a picture of that somewhere in here. I've looked at right there.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Look at that sucker. Wow. Yep. But you can imagine the weight and the complexity of it. And they really tried. I mean, they really tried. I mean, on these productions, you don't know how much people put into things, and then you end up not using it.
Yeah, because even like I'm not sure if familiar with Jurassic Park 3, but there's that one shot where you see the raptor's feet moving, and then they cut to another shot with a sickle claw
Yeah.
going onto the guy's back, and those are two different shots they did.
Yeah.
From there, so that was probably a lot less.
I don't know. And maybe they kept those for inserts, right? At some point,
Mhm.
I don't know. I'd have to go back and watch it. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen that movie since, I don't know, early 2000s. What the heck is that? The inside of the baby?
Yeah, that's a baby
Looks like
inside.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Is that the head? Or is that
yeah. Head's about there, tail's right around there.
Okay.
Arms.
Wow.
And then I think that would definitely be the adult one right here. It's like because they're and then
there's Jim and there's Mark and Dave. I love I do love a lot the personality they really put into the baby's faces. That's why I wanted to see it more. Because it just had so much personality. Look at that. Isn't that mind-blowing? Oh my, I forgot. Yeah, that's Mike Smithson, who's did a lot of Michael Jackson's makeup for Stan Winston. If you see the music video for Ghosts, the Michael Jackson movie or music video, they have during the credits, you see Mike doing the makeup in the trailer. And that's actually where I learned a lot of the material and techniques, especially the brush of death, where you have to use a large brush with a bunch of brushes taped together to get the stipple color. And they showed him doing that. And back in the day, you'd have to pause it on the VCR and then take a Polaroid of it and, research it. God, look at that neck. And there's Tom Flouts. Yeah, working on the inside of the mouth. That's the baby. Yeah, that's God, Tom is so talented. There's the that's the maquette. Yeah, it's got to be because those are claws right there. Yeah, that was actually with latex. I think it's just how they did that. I could be wrong. I think they put latex over the texture, but I just don't remember. There's the big one. Yeah. Yeah. But that was done in the sculpting by heating it with a torch and then hitting it with air and having it blow. Maybe not on the big one as much as the small one. Look at that sucker. Look at he's hitting the rafters.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I felt about this. I think it's the only way it could have existed, but it just in the movie it's not as obvious because we would always see them static and it just kind of got on your nerves. You want to see them do stuff. But to me, that kind of implies like a T-Rex or a dinosaur, but they don't necessarily. When they hold it in that position, I don't think naturally they're going to have the range to climb buildings and do all of that. It's very much like a T-Rex style thing, like they're locked in position. I would have thought he could have or she could have used her arms more for picking things up. Muscles, there were muscles on those arms.
What's super interesting is that, like with Jurassic Park, you had a lot of the dinosaurs with their arms like this, where now a lot of it is like the hands are giving a clapping motion, so that kind of scaling would have been.
Yeah, exactly. Too. That's what they said. Nowadays they've changed it.
And we do see Godzilla like swiping helicopters like that in the film.
Like this, with
like that, yeah.
Yeah, the first one.
And it does climb, and it holds onto buildings to the side too, doesn't it? Because the first maquette we saw that Jake sculpted, it's holding on with one arm, and it's got an arm up in the air like King Kong. It was, I think, purposely done like that.
And although it wasn't like a practical scene, we do see when it's underground, it's sort of digging forward and stuff.
Yeah. How does the CG hold up? Is it still hold up, or is it kind of janky?
There's some scenes that are not as good, even compared to like Lost World that was coming out around the same time.
Have they done a like a 4K?
Yeah, they've done 4K.
When did that come out?
A couple of years ago, because I got my 4K right here.
Yeah, I might look for that.
Yeah,
I don't think the poster and the cover they chose was the best either. So, I don't think the poster was the best. Just a flat eye. It wasn't even taken from the sculpture or anything. I don't think it looked like it was a design. I could be wrong, but I don't know. I thought they could have been better. I think that would have drawn more people in. But I guess you don't want to give away the creature. I understand that. What were you saying, Victor?
Oh no, just about the what was it? I forget what I was saying before you just more
Something
about
the
the
3D or the 4K restoration, or
yeah, like the long shots you see when he's in the rain and he's just lurking. Those are really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the practical stuff does hold up well.
And I'm not on the previous big shot. I think the you can see the fabric they're using to bridge the gaps on the big one that the foam
Yeah,
goes
let me
over.
try to.
I'm not sure if it's that brown section.
Yeah, this area around here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't tell. That looks like foam, to be honest, but it could just be a working foam. And it's not a. I don't think that's a fiberglass understructure. At least not where it's around the back of the head. I think I see the overlap of the fabric there. And that's what you use to bridge it, so the foam doesn't get pinched or ripped.
Mm.
But you do have to design it in a way, huh?
I think Johnny did say like the helmets and stuff were fiberglass.
Yeah, no, they're going to be either carbon fiber or glass. But when you're doing animatronic, you can see these are the raw CNC milled out parts. See, they have the lines on them, and you glue them together around the understructure. And our job is to come in and refine it, and then get it ready for molding. The other team on the big one did a lot more work than I did. I was just working on the plates and some other small stuff. But the animatronics for the eyes. Oh yeah, there's Todd with see those are the helmets I told you about. God, those helmets were so expensive. I like working in foam though, but it's kind of like carving marble. You can't take away too much. I mean, you can fix it, but still, it's different than working with clay. You can always just put some clay back on.
With this, where was specifically with this part, was the suit like you guys already had like an idea of where the suit was, and this was just sort of pieces that you guys were trying on?
Yeah, this was test fitting on performers, seeing what needed to be adjusted or changed, movement. You're thinking of patching, animatronics. I don't think there's any animatronics in this either. See how the tail looks deflated a little bit?
Yeah.
I think it's just test fitting, maybe with an armature. I could be wrong, but that's the feeling I'm getting. And obviously, they were thinking about that. Hands there.
Another thing, what's it called?
He was sweating like a son of a bitch. All of them were.
When
they took those off, yeah.
But with because I think at this point, 2 of the Underworld films had come out at this point. I know at least Underworld 1 had come out, and I know Patrick had worked doing the lichen designs for that. Did like a lot of the sort of mechanical philosophy with like making those suits and stuff kind of carry over into?
Oh, sure. You have the same people. So
yeah.
Steve Larry, right, sculpting a lot of that beautiful stuff and painting, and Patrick, and yes. So in fact, if you look at the lichens, they have a similar look to their personality that Godzilla does.
Yeah, because they definitely have that very similar look.
And that's his
that sleek, muscular build.
Yeah,
because even compared to like the American Werewolf in London, his lichens are very, very slimmed down, and like same with his Godzilla.
They are. It's speed, and it's how he goes after it. I mean, he there you go. Look at that. I remember when that was made. Those were gorgeous. Those were the functional ones. That was before they added on the kickstand. And they did try, and I think they even had to do something with the nails too, because they were, I think, causing some issue. Well, there's a little bit of the kickstand down there, but that's not the one. They added a big, like a rod with like a rubber tip on the end that they painted red or something. Yeah, I think they had to make some changes with the material for the nails or something. I can't remember. Or they had to raise it up on the bottom so there was a pad underneath so you could have a rock and then pull it up without damaging the nails.
Just out of my own curiosity, do you think that if they, like, since you talked about design earlier, if they had ended up having the design more erect and that tail would have been serving more as a counterbalance, do you think that they probably would have used more of the suit, especially with these nails here, like for more practical, or do you think that probably they were just going to want to use more CG in general?
You mean for that particular movie?
Yeah, for 98, yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking, but in regards to the mechanics of the tail.
Well, no, I'm saying that, like, since the design has the tail sort of reared up and you're essentially having
in that earlier shot?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was sculpted straight. You always want to sculpt it at the most neutral point of movement. So depending on what the neutral position of the movement is, you're going to sculpt it like that. because you want to get the most stretch you can without it ripping in different directions. So if you sculpt it straight and you try to bend all the way in, you're going to get more ripping potential here. If you sculpt it like this, well, then you have more range this way and more range this way. And that tail, as foam, I mean, they probably could have flipped it with animatronics. You had so much movement there in regards to the length and the amount of surface area of foam. And you saw the understructure. There was no fiberglass there. It was laid. Well, they had the reinforcement, the fabric reinforcement on top of the understructure inside it. So they could have done a lot with it, and it was perfectly balanced with the tail, but it was just too violent a shift in the balance for the suit performers. Could have been a weight issue too, and they were probably trying. Well, we got to make it, lighter. We got to make it lighter. We got to make it lighter.
Actually, no, that makes sense. Interesting. Let me see if there's any like really good shots of like the inner mechanics. There's some shots of the mechanics.
Yeah, there was one shot of that you showed. Oh, that's a great shot too. That was Mark.
Tail.
Maybe. Yeah, it was all those black sections. They had a mechanic.
Oh, right here. There it is.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. So they ended up not using that. Well, on Mimic, I sculpted these beautiful antennae. They had physical antennae, and they were animatronic, and they whipped around, and they were amazing. But if I recall, I could be wrong, but I think they said they were too dangerous for Mia Sorvino, because she actually beat the shit, pardon my language, out of that bug with a baseball bat. I mean, it was in the sewers and tunnels, and they said, "Okay, we need you to act like you're hitting it." With a real, she banged it, and Rick was, because you're in Canada, that's where they shot, and you only have a small team, and you spent millions of dollars on this thing, and come in there with a baseball bat and wail on it in the middle of production.
Actually, speaking of the budget, I think the most sources cite that the budget was around 150 million. Is that right? Or
I don't know the total budget. I just know that they were paying people top dollar.
Gotcha.
In that production, they were making money hands over fist. Everybody on that production.
Oh, nice. I know, like there was also a point too when like the general whole big budget had increased a little bit. Were you guys informed about that? And you were sort of like able to? No.
We're not in those meetings. So I would reach out to Jake if he's interested in speaking to you, or Patrick. Maybe you've already done that, but. I don't know if you guys reach out to them, but they would give you the most insight. For mechanics, it would be Dave Kinlan, Guy Himber, of course, Gino for the art side, and Steve. Reaching out to all those people. You'd cover the gamut. Tom Flouts, Dave Grasso, Mark Maitre, Jim Cagle. I'm sure, I would hope. Craig probably not so much, but I would hope, because he's more of a hermit, a lovable hermit. But I'm sure they'd be willing to give you their insight on the production. Of course, the higher you go up in Hollywood, the less they're willing to talk about the details, because there's this unspoken etiquette in Hollywood that, you try to be always positive, and you try to never say anything negative, and they don't want to get, they don't want to look like they're coming off as complaining. And I get it. It's total. Me, I'm just a worker. I'm a clay pusher. I'm the guy on the ground. So, but Jake would be really good for that, because although he's super busy. Patrick, of course. I think Patrick's retired. I don't even know if he's directing anymore. I could be wrong.
I know he worked on Zack Snyder's Justice League, right?
Yeah, I think he did.
Oh, did he? Yeah. Was he a designer, or was he a second unit director? Or
I think he was a designer, I believe. I think he did some of the stuff for Steppenwolf specifically. At least I think that was specifically what I remember.
Well, good, because I liked his design work much better than the original. I'm a huge fan of the Zack Snyder production, just because I'm a huge DC fan, and I want it done right. And that's the great thing about DC is the villains. They have the best villains in the world. They're the Joker and Darkseid and Steppenwolf and all these great guys.
Oh, actually, specifically, if you got to design one DC villain, who would you want to design?
One existing one?
Any DC villain. It's your choice.
Well, I mean, I love the Joker. If anybody's seen my work, I do tons of Joker stuff. Like I said, I'm autistic, so I have certain characters I just can't get out of my head. I love what they did with I think it was Mike Marino, but I'm probably wrong. But I probably am wrong. But did the Penguin in the latest Batman movie? Oh my God, that was gorgeous. I did. There's very few Joker makeups I like or appreciate, just because it's personal to me. You know, maybe like how this stuff is personal to you guys and you have strong opinions. I have really strong opinions about certain characters because, you know, they might say, well, a lot of it comes down to when you're dealing with performers that it's their face and they're hired because of who they are. They don't want to have their face covered. So you as the actor or as the artist, you're limited by that. And it's a team effort, you know, you need to work with them and go, okay, well, obviously we need to show this or show that and your range and so on. But, you know, the fan in me just wants to cover their face entirely and bring right off the comic book pages. But I love the Joker. I still think they have not done the Joker justice at all. I'm a big fan of the New 52 Joker where they carved his face off and he ended up strapping it on. Yeah, there's my New 52 Joker. I've done like a small version of that, the multiple prosthetics, masks. Yeah, it's a teeth class we'll be teaching, that I'll be teaching, I think later on this year. And then if you go to let's see, go up? Is this, yeah, you can see that's the Raptor in my very first job with Alan Apone for Spy Hard, a comedy with Leslie Nielsen. The suit didn't turn out so great, but it was more because of the body was way too big compared to the tail and the head. But that was fun. That was my first. But I had done dinosaurs before, you know, animatronics and theme parks. They love dinosaurs. And of course, there's Thanos, and I love Thanos. I was not a fan of some of the design choices, not the sculpting. The sculpting was technically beautiful, but you know, again, I want stuff to look like it. You know, I'm a big fan of Ron Len and those guys and the original Thanos designs. My Cthulhu. And there's V.
I've met V.
Oh, were you
He's
ever
very
keeping
nice.
up? Did you ever keep up with Del Toro's At the Mountains of Madness production?
I did. Yeah, I had the script years and years and years ago. When we were working on Godzilla, they were passing around the script for Aliens versus Predator, or Alien versus Predator, which they never made. But if you read about it, it's come out recently what that script was, and it was freaking amazing. It was actually the next Alien film. I think it was supposed to be Alien 4, but I could be wrong. Resurrection, where initially the aliens were supposed to come back to Earth, and that was the whole deal. They ravage Earth, and at the very end of the film, you have this woman and her two kids, and they're in New York, and they're in an alley, and the city's destroyed, and they're getting backed into this alley, and they bump up against this destroyed car, and they're going to die, and then the car shakes, and the aliens stop, and they back up, and then you have a shot of the people, and they turn around, and you have a predator that uncloaks itself on the hood of the car, and the ships uncloak themselves in the sky over New York, and then more predators, and that's the end of the movie. Come on!
Oh.
That they didn't make it. They didn't make it.
That is beautiful, but that's also such a tease
going,
too.
oh my God, who's gonna make this? And I want to work on it. You know.
Funny enough, Roland Emmerich was one of the directors who were supposed to do the AVP film.
Oh wow!
I believe
if it would have. That's probably why we had that script. But yeah, same thing with Mountains of Madness. I mean, Guillermo would have been amazing. I mean, Guillermo has a few of my Lovecraft pieces. He has one in his Dark House, my Cthulhu and my Lovecraft bust, and which I'm honored beyond belief. But yeah, you want people in charge that are fans. You don't want people saying, we're going to subvert expectations and turn Luke Skywalker into a simpering blue milk drinking hermit that doesn't care about the world anymore. You want people that treat them with respect, because you're making these movies. No Jake Scott. I actually have a Twitter account, Jake Skywalker, when that first happened. And I was going around, trying to troll people. It was funny.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You can see one of the the Cthulhu, the King Cthulhu I just came out with, it, selling as a limited garage kit. But he's huge. He's a big one. I love dragons. I love werewolves. Never worked on a werewolf film, but I'm doing this Lupus Legatus, a Roman centurion werewolf. And you can see that's my Arkham Asylum Joker makeup right there from the video game, which I had tons of fun working on, and I love that design of that character. And he and Dave Snyder did a wonderful job playing that character. Click on the one with the video right there, and you can see where he.
Oh, that's one right here. Yeah,
he does a great job. I mean, see, it moves great. He's got great attitude, and hair is a little too green for me, but other than that, it was almost. I wanted to keep it as close to the video game as possible. I mean, that whole subverting expectations thing is just bullshit. I'm sorry. You make these for the fans. You also make them for the producers and the investors. But that's the problem with Hollywood, is it's too much by the numbers. No one's willing to go off on their own, and that's why now my favorite films are indie films or foreign films. I'm not a big fan of a lot of but they're coming back around. Thank God, because they got Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni in over at Lucasfilm, to take over from Kathleen Kennedy, and hopefully stop her burning the place down. And they're fans; they love it. They grew up with that stuff. They're happy to work on it. It's an honor, and I feel the same way. But just having that opportunity to go in there, I feel like I'm representing all of the fans that love these creatures. To me, these creatures. It's not a paycheck. It's you want to create something that people believe and they have emotion about, and you want them to cry. You want them to laugh. I want them to look at something and go, "Oh, what did they have for breakfast? What are they planning on doing tonight? What's their whole focus?" And I don't know. I love this stuff.
And I can definitely say that that worked on me when I first saw the film. Falling in love with 98 was like something that really impacted my life.
Yeah.
It was one of the first films I ever saw when I was like 3 years old, just sitting on my couch.
Wow. That's awesome. I should probably go ahead and get that 4K Blu-ray.
It's still thankfully readily available, so if that is...
Oh, was it a limited, or are they still selling
it? Wasn't limited. It was just like, it's something that you could still readily get from like almost any retailer, like a Best Buy or anything like that.
Was it like $30 or something?
30, 25, I think. What did I get mine for? Like 20 something.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I even still have my old what's it called? Still got my old DVD right here.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't have. Oh no, I do have a 4K player. I just get so lazy with digital, But the one thing I don't like about digital is that the production companies will go back and re-edit it, and it'll stealthily do it on your system. I mean, that happens with iTunes all the time. I'm not a fan of that. I'm very libertarian when it comes to my things that I love and I own, and don't touch it. Stay away from it.
Agreed there. I think real quick, because a few people started asking, since it related to your sculpting, Jace asked, what was your favorite thing you ever sculpted?
Wow, boy, they're all my babies. There are some jobs you do because they're jobs, right? You need a paycheck and you just want to get done. But Mimic, Godzilla definitely are at the top. But I do a lot of my own personal things. I love my Lovecraftian pieces, like my Innsmouth pieces, or it's weird. I just came to an epiphany the last few weeks, in that most of the pieces that I love, I'm always shocked that it doesn't get the response that I think it should get, just because I'm looking at it through a completely different filter, than everyone else. And it's not because I think it's great. I'm just like, when I'm doing it, I'm so excited. It's like when you're creating something in a sculpture or design, I look at it as I dip my creativity down into this sub realm of this big creative ocean where I'm able to exist just for that period of time, and you get a high. when you're doing it. You know, it's like when you're doing something you love and hours pass and you don't realize it. And then when you're done, you're kind of spacey. You're like playing a game that you love, because I'm a huge gamer. I love board games, I love video games. I mean, I still have my Apple IIe that I play games on. I'm a retro guy too. I love hardware. So it's, you know, but that's a pitfall too, because you can get trapped into your own perspective, and you have to back up. You know, like when I'm working on a piece now, which I hate, but um, but then I'll love at the end of the night, but then I'll cover it, or I'll come in the next day after I've slept and I'll turn on the lights and then turn around and look at it. And you immediately see it from someone else's perspective. Or I sculpt in a mirror. So I'll look at it in the mirror and then you're seeing it in the reverse. So it helps you see it from other people's perspective, and then you can make changes and adjustments. I mean, I love doing Cthulhu. I'm Cthulhu'd out though, I think. Yeah, I went through, you go through phases as an artist, you know, as you've seen, there's a lot of people, you know, even looking at, you know, popular artists like Picasso or Dali or other people, they went through phases as well. Beksinski, who's one of my favorite, Sukowski, you know, they'll have phases and then they'll move into like, Beksinski moved into, he's a Polish illustrator, painter, is incredible. Passed. He's not around anymore, but he, and kind of like Giger, he moved into you know, Photoshop and digital and all this weird stuff, and just because it was the technology more. So I don't know. I mean, right now I'm kind of, it's more like you know, it's more human and emotional, and I love doing that. But then other times I want to do creatures and horns and tentacles, and then old age. And I don't know. It's a great question. That's a hard question. I mean, that's like saying, which of your kids do you love the best? You know, which kid would you save from the earthquake, you know, or the fire?
I love all my children equally.
Yes, that's the politically correct and appropriate thing to say, so you don't scar your other kids for life.
And then another person, General Productions asked, I'm here that the foam latex mask and stuff broke down over time, like the Batman Returns mask. So do you have any ideas how to look after the masks?
Yeah, foam latex will break down. Now, certain brands of foam, especially going way back to, there are different brands like Berman and Monster Foam and Alcone. And back in the day, though, they had R&D, which is the first foam I used, which was a 3-component foam. All of them are 4-component now. And then you get back into the George Bow formula and all of those things. You can't tell I teach this stuff too. I tend to rattle things off. But again, I go down this rabbit hole and I love it. It's great. Yes, it's foam latex. So if you put a foam latex couch out in the sun, you've seen them on the side of the road, right? They break down, they get stiff. It's the latex part. So you should, to be honest, you should cover them in a bag and you know, maybe put a paper towel over them or something to protect them. Store them in a you know, away from direct light and air. And I like the Dick Smith pieces we have from The Exorcist. You could still apply them. I mean, they were in a box for decades, a cardboard box, and they still are holding up great. So it depends on how they're stored. I also have other pieces from classics that you know, I would love to display or to take places, but they're so brittle. At that point, you should pay for a specialist to fix it. And the fixing doesn't mean it's going to be soft and flexible. The fixing means they will go in and sculpt the missing texture and then coat it with a hard resin, let it soak into it, and then use epoxy. And to me, I hate doing that, although I really admire what they do because I'm such a purist. I would rather keep the rotten foam piece because it's the direct descendant of the people working on it and all of that. So yeah, silicone lasts a lot longer, obviously. And you know, if you have the best thing to do is to get if somebody could do a flexible negative mold of that piece, then you could pour out a hard resin copy, you know, and then it's gonna, you know, reflect the actual soul of the sculptor. Because I love seeing the flow and the form and the sculpting marks and what they were thinking. And when I go to museums and I look at especially marble busts, which I love. I always look at the backs because that's where you can see the chisel marks and how they put it together and all of those things. To me, that's just as fascinating as the final thing.
I know someone else in the chat had a question.
And then
I had a question too, which was, what is your favorite video game right now at the moment that you've been
Right
playing?
now, it's V Rising.
Wow.
It's a Steam game. I love that one, but I'm almost finished with it. Let's see what else. Before that, there's a game called Walson, which is great. It's a Diablo type clone. It's pretty fun. When I'm on my PS5, I'll probably fire up a Dark Souls series. I love Elden Ring. I loved it, loved it, loved it.
Did you get to play the Demon Souls remake for PS5?
Yeah, I have that. Yeah, that one, Dark Souls 3, is fantastic. I go into and watch tons of videos on people doing gameplay and walkthroughs, and that's great for having in the background. Like Splattercat on YouTube, I love his stuff. So he'll just be playing indie games, and I like a lot of really cheap indie games too. And right now the retro pixel games are so popular, and that's kind of cool because I still love those, but for a different reason than the newer generation love them. They love them because they're kitschy and they're retro and they're cheap. But I love them because it takes me back to when I had my Intellivision.
Yeah.
Playing Oregon Trail or Ultima series. I love the Ultima.
Have you been into like the big boomer shooter craze recently?
What's that?
So like games like Dusk, Dread Templar, a Medieval, those games. They're very much aping games like Doom and the original Quake and the like.
Oh yeah, well, I haven't played those, but I was really big into games like Heretic and Hexen.
They're very similar to those. Look those games up if you want something that's going to take you back to games like those.
Actually, if you could text me that or send me that, that'd be great.
I will definitely DM you those after the stream. You'll love them.
I mean, I remember when I got my first PC. It was in '95, and it was a Packard Bell. HP Packard Bell. They make computers, and it was Windows 3.1, and it came with the Windows 95 upgrade, and it had this newfangled thing called a CD drive, and I got that Star Wars game that was a first-person shooter,
Dark Forces.
Dark Forces, my God!
Yeah.
And I was a big torrenter back then. Before it was known as torrents, it was LimeWire and Pirate Bay. Well, before Pirate Bay. So I would be downloading music, and kids don't download anything from Hollywood, but to take money away from people. But that was the day when you had to have modems, and you had to yell at your mom when you're downloading something. But you would download. Everything was in the chunk file size of a floppy. So it was 3 megabytes, and then you would spend a whole week downloading a game or a movie or something, and then you would have to run a program to compile it, the SFV checker, to make sure all of the chunks were good, and then it would compile it into the game. And if one was screwed up, you'd have to find out where you got it and download it again. And but I love those games. Quake, oh my God, Quake was mind blowing when it came out.
No, trust me, you will love Dusk if you loved Quake.
Really? Oh, that's awesome. I love it. I mean, when those Doberman Pinschers came out in the beginning of Quake, and you had the platforms, and then I didn't really get into the competitive gaming as much. I loved the single player. And I was really big into role-playing games, and I always have been. Like, I loved a game called Darkfall that has since died. I loved
Cyberpunk.
Well, I played it a little bit, but I think I played it too early because I know they've fixed it a lot since then. It's gorgeous. And I've got a really powerful PC here. So
I was also thinking of the actual Cyberpunk tabletop too.
Oh, I never played that.
Oh, wow.
No, never played that. For tabletop, I wasn't as much tabletop as much as I was D&D and more using your imagination, but not as much. I mean, I was a big Dark Tower player, and when it came out in the 80s, my fiance Rabbit bought me a version of it, which was awesome. She found it on eBay, got it. We haven't even played it yet, but when your parents tell you playing games and watching movies, you're going to rot your brain. That's what my dad always told me. Well, I just found a way to make a living out of it. you know, so if you love that stuff and you want to do it, find a way to be involved. But yeah, I'm a huge gamer. I'd be interested to hear about that. Oh, you know what? I was watching a few videos about some of those. Hexen and Heretic were great. And it's tough to recapture that because when I was around, right, that was the first time anyone had ever experienced anything like that. So it's like seeing a movie where you're blown away by something like when you were 3. So you're judging everything not necessarily by the gameplay or whatever, but by the emotional connection you had. And you know, to me, you know, games are just as important as movies. I mean, like now with The Last of Us, you know, they're actually doing it well, which makes me very happy. I just saw the last episode last night on HBO. And I'd love, there's so many properties out there that can make wonderful shows on, as long as the showrunners are fans of the original. You know, I'm not saying you can't change things up and change characters, that's fine, but the feeling, the emotion, the movement, the, you know, what they were trying to do with it, that's important.
In that case, definitely. There's a few other questions also from chat.
And then Zim, I sent you a picture, a post.
Yeah, let me grab that. And while Mr. Lee
oh yeah, we're gonna Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Well, there was. Oh, I don't know if you want to read it for people or.
Yeah,
I'll do that. Question, yeah.
What kind? I'm actually a huge fan of Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. What kind of awesome stuff did you get to do on that?
Well, I was on the scene where what's his name, Rob, or the actor, the 2 big actors that were in it, the guy that played Iron Man,
Robert Downey Jr.
Robert Downey Jr. Yeah, the scene where he goes to that party and they're looking for that girl. I guess I've only seen the movie once and it's been ages, but we were at the Shane Black, I think, was the director. Who's directed a lot of great stuff. He might have directed Iron Man, but I can't remember. But we actually filmed it at his house down there in the Mid Wilshire district, his mansion. But I had to create these horns, these wooden. It was like a Joseph and Mary weird character thing. So I had to create these wooden horns. Then I had to do these nipples with big crosses hanging from them. So you had to make fake nipples. God, I can't remember. There was a few other things, and that was a hell of a shoot. I mean, I was on set with that one. I don't get to go on set with everything, but that one I created and it was on set doing the application. That was, and I met Rallis Khan there, and I worked with him on Slipknot. I did a Slipknot mask with him with Sid.
That actually does remind me. Someone I was talking to earlier today, she's a fan of Slipknot, and since I was going to be hosting this, what was your experience with Slipknot anyway?
Oh well, I worked with Sid directly, Sid Wilson. He's incredible. I just chatted with him yesterday. We're thinking of doing something else, but I did the Transformer mask, the gray and black one, the mechanical one, and then I did the one now that he's using that is his face, but a bigger version, a silicone animatronic version. And he wants to do some other stuff, so hopefully. But he was awesome. I mean, he's a huge fan. You go over to his house and he's got shit everywhere, and you know, he's just a guy, and it's nice. I respect them a lot because at least from my experience, they're artists, not just musicians, but you know, they're artists. They really care about the creativity and they give you a lot of flexibility. And now they'll have designs and everything, but interacting with them, especially with Sid, was great. And I hope I can, you know, work with him again. I've worked with Alice Cooper, Usher. I've done a lot of effects work for musicians as well. Obviously, music videos, they tend to involve, for the more creatives, you know, like Ozzy Osbourne and people that really like to have prosthetics or creatures or characters. So yeah, when you can work with someone that really appreciates what you do, and it just makes you appreciate them more so. And I hope more, producers and directors and musicians, and I hope they keep that in mind. We want to make them look as good as possible, you know, so they need to, you know, sometimes chill or relax or give us the money we need if we request it, if they're going to ask for something else, you know, like, well, that's I'm a business, I'm putting more hours in. I'll need a little more money, but it all depends. But yeah, I had zero problems. Worked with Rollis Khan on the Transformer, and then I worked with Lainey Chantel, sadly, who's passed away last year, on the second one. She was one of my students, one of my graduates, and she had done a lot of music video work, and so she did I think the painting for it, and then got in touch with me because she knew I'd worked with Sid. Yeah, so that was awesome. It was fun. I enjoy working with creatives just across the board.
They're always the fun people to work with.
Yeah, that's important, I think. I mean, a job is a job, but if they really appreciate you and they're fun, and you could literally, I mean, Sid and I just talked for hours about creative shit,
Well, yeah, it's always good when you have that connection there. You can just sort of ramble off, especially. It just makes the job even better.
It does. And, and a lot of people that aren't fans of particular genres of music, because I'm a huge punk fan. I love the Cramps, and I saw them way back in 92 or 91. And I love TSOL and, The Damned, and, lots of guys like Misfits, and Heavy, my huge metalhead. But it's important to work with, people that I think that you like, because it makes you more fulfilled, that you can die saying, hey, I got to work with that guy, and it was cool. It was neat. After you do it, it's different, because in that person, that celebrity becomes a person. Then you have your number in their phone and you chat occasionally or whatever. And so it's important to remember that you should be thankful to your old version of yourself for really pushing to do that. A lot of people would be too afraid or too scared or not thinking they're good enough. And I feel that too all the time. But you have to push through that anxiety and realize that it's just a feeling in your stomach, and that's all it is. It's just a physical sensation. The anxiety is not real. It's just, rumination and overthinking. And you just got to do it, because once you do it, even if it goes south, at least you tried. You can look back and say, hey, I tried. But yeah, I've never had a single, with an actor or musician, I don't think I've ever had a bad experience. I've had bad experiences with other artists working, but it's very rare. But it tends to be people that aren't around anymore, or couldn't hack it, or got too bitter, or I don't know, whatever. But generally, it's always been a very pleasant, at a minimum, experience. Yeah, and Sid and I have a very similar aesthetic, I think. He loves the Transformers and the 80s cartoons, and but he also loves Lovecraft and Cthulhu, and he's got a lot of strange stuff in his house, but he loves having things made, and doing, his own stuff too. I mean, his music is wonderful. So yeah, sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
Oh no, you're good. Trust me. And I know Vic sent me this. He want to show us. Actually, it looks like an auction that had come up for some more 98 related stuff.
That is a foam piece.
I know. There it is.
It looks like foam. It's a gray foam with latex painted into the horns. No teeth though, and it's deformed. But it looks like it is on the understructure. But they don't have the eye in the right position.
Yeah. And it's also showing, I think, here's another shot of it from this angle.
Oh, that one looks okay. You know what? It's probably distorted, and I don't know. Maybe they didn't store it. But you see that yellowish color? I don't think that's the foam. I remember them brushing latex into certain areas to make them tougher. It's still flexible, but it makes it stronger. And it also elongates the life of it. So, yeah, that's really cool. See, what I would do is I would do a mold of that, do a clay pour, and then fix it. And then do another mold and make a nice display head.
I'm borrowing.
So it was a stunt.
Yeah. It's probably the it's probably like the under.
Yeah, a stunt means it wasn't used, or it was used, but it wasn't a camera ready kind of thing. It was a background or a far shot.
You can see some of the distortion right here, like right around the gum line there.
Yeah. See how thin that foam is?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, when you're doing the sculpture, when you make the mold is hollow, unless it's on the arms or the legs, where there's a life cast, but on the head and the tail, solid clay. So they go in and make a core afterwards by laying in a thin layer of clay, and then you make that fiberglass piece. So then you have, and you also make the core that you can run the foam around, so it fits perfectly. But like you were speaking about Batman, I think earlier, with the foam falling apart with Batman, especially on the later ones. I don't know if they did it on the first one, but maybe the second, third, and on. What they would do is after you do the life cast, you would layer dental wax. You can buy thin sheets of it and pink dental wax, and they would layer it all over the life cast, clean it up a certain amount of thickness, and then they would remold it again, and then that's what you would run the foam on, is that second generation, because foam shrinks. So you had to know the percentage of the shrinkage of the foam, because you don't want it so tight that it either, from your perspective, it rips when they put it on. I mean, that was a thick piece, especially the Michael Keaton one.
Yeah.
Later on, they where it was separate, because that was the issue. And you see him in the jet, when he looks, he's kind of turning his whole body because he couldn't move.
Or the one scene from I think it was the second Batman movie where he takes the whole thing off and you can just see how thick it is, like right around the neck area.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that was an issue with George Clooney that I think drove Jose crazy, was because he sculpted all of them after Steve had done them. Again, these are the stories I get to hear when I'm working with these guys. Clooney on takes or breaks, he would take the cowl and pull it up like this so people could see his face and he could talk, and he just didn't want it on his face. Well, what happens? It rips right there. So they would constantly have to run new pieces. And that's a lot of money.
Speaking of something else that's kind of related to masks and the like, you've probably, because you did mention that you'd seen Prey recently, and although there wasn't a whole lot of practical effects that were done in that movie, there was this one guy, he did a video, I'd have to link it to you, where he was talking about how the different Predator masks were made, and specifically with like some of the ones with like Predators by Shane Black, how that suit and that face had like a lot of issues, especially where the mandibles would have those issues where it kind of formed around, because they probably formed at a wrong angle when you were talking about how they wanted at the most neutral posture so you could get the most effect out of it. It's a really interesting
video. They did have a lot of range. So
yeah, because like especially with like the original mask where it comes in and then it flays out, with the other newer masks, the issue was that like right around that gum area between those two tusks, you'd always see a lot of forming there. So it'd have these kind of like little rings coming out towards the sides.
Yeah. I think you said it was because they sculpted it like this.
Yeah.
So when it closes, it folds rather like this, and then it stretches.
Well, you can sculpt it closed as long as you sculpt the wrinkles that you can create that help with that. There's other ways too of using different material in the joints other than foam. The problem with doing those out of silicone, which is going to solve a lot of those issues, is its weight, and it doesn't breathe. So it's heavy and it's hot, and you can't do that. I mean, if you look at what happened on the first Predator film, Kevin Peter Hall, who was also the creature suit performer from Harry and the Hendersons, and did amazing work. He ended up dying of pneumonia because of when he was wearing the Predator suit, they would take it. He would take it off in between takes or in between longer, breaks. But the problem was he was sweating so much. But then he'd take it off and he'd get cold. He would get chilly, right? Because he's covered in moisture. Then they put it back on, and they had designed this cool suit that was brilliant. And it was sad because the guy that designed it, Chris Gilman, Global Effects, I'm pretty sure they kind of blamed him, but he said no, they were designed to not have the head taken off, and I don't know whose decision it was, and it was the first time it happened, so it was kind of holy shit, it's like dealing with all the after effects of the vaccine and all these people having heart attacks and clots and all this stuff. Well, we didn't know at the time. I mean, we thought we were doing the best we could, and and then you deal with it. And I met his niece, and she's really sweet. I don't think it was his daughter. I think it was his niece. But you never know. Sometimes, but your job is to try to anticipate, as a foam technician or a mechanic or even a sculptor, definitely. And a designer, a lot of times the designers, they're designing. So they're not necessarily, that's not their job to think about a lot of the technical aspects of it, the logistics, but as the creator, it's got to make a physical thing that has to work. You got to make changes and adjustments, and sometimes you're not allowed to because someone's stuck on something that they really want. And okay, well, this is going to happen. I've had that set with me many times where I've gone on set knowing it was going to rip and knowing I was the guy on set that had to take the heat, even though I was the one yelling fire for months beforehand. And you hope it doesn't happen. Even on Spy Hard, my first job, I went on set and we made this giant muscle arm Jeremy Aiello sculpt. Is gorgeous, and we made it all out of silicone, and we had this armature, and it had a stretch bungee cord inside. And in the movie, he's his love interest, I think was what's her name, Elvis's wife, Priscilla Presley. I think she was the opposite of him. I don't know, but he grabs her as she's falling off the cliff. We filmed it off on the coast. There's a lighthouse there, and she's trying not to fall, and she rips his sleeve off, and you see that this old man Leslie Nielsen has this big muscly arm, and then it starts stretching as she's pulling it, and I just was like, that's gonna rip, because we put so much silicone fluid in it to get that amount of stretch. Fortunately, it didn't, but I remember all day in the back of my mind, especially with my autism, I was like, I was creating all these situations that I was going to be responsible for when it wasn't my decision.
You do like
I totally know this. When you have people go on set, I don't blame them for things that happen, because you never know what they were dealing with and what they had to deal with. People that aren't in the industry don't understand that sometimes, and they go, "Oh, I hate that design." Well, did you find out why they did that? I mean, maybe there's a good reason. Maybe don't blame the person automatically. Do some research if you're going to have a feeling about it and it's going to cause emotion to you. Figure out what happened.
Well, like a fun little Godzilla fact too is that you're familiar with the monster Gigan, right? Yeah. So like when they were originally doing that suit, those hook hands were solid fiberglass originally. Yeah, solid fiberglass.
There had to have been a handle at a minimum for that guy.
No, I think there was handles in them, but the guy, he ended up being the 90s Godzilla suit actor, Kenpachiro Satsuma. When he had to put those hands in, he essentially couldn't really do anything with them, and he was fighting with the suit designer to get those fixed. And that was something they ended up learning a lot of time later, because in the later Godzilla movie, Final Wars, that Gigans, those hands were actually whole different mechanisms that they put in, so they could swap those out for different armaments for that Gigan suit.
Yeah, and that's how you should do it. If you're going to have scenes where the person needs to be active, and if the hands don't necessarily need to have close-ups, or they don't need to hit something and look like they put in foam or lightweight ones or whatever. I mean, it's kind of like what they did on Legend. Rob Bottin working on Tim Curry. He had to have these big horns that he had to wear. They were lightweight, foam, and they were very delicate. But there's that one scene where he runs and slams up against the column, and Tom Cruise is there. You got to make those heavy ones, but you also got to think about your actors. It's not worth. I mean, look at this whole situation with the shooting.
Yeah, Baldwin. Yeah.
Sometimes they play it fast and loose, and our job is to protect our actors if no one else is going to do it. I mean, I've done many makeups that were their mouths were covered or their eyes are covered. They're blind, or you have some kind of design. You tell them, hey, I need this shot done in the beginning of the day, because otherwise this person's going to be sitting around blind all day. And we always joke about it, but we say, look, I'm doing a blind makeup on you, so they won't shoot you until the end of the day. and you're not in control of the production schedule. All you can do is give your opinion and fight as hard as you want. But the actor doesn't want to lose their job, and you don't want to lose your job. So you got to balance that out. It's the politics of the situation. But I think I think it's gotten a lot better in the industry. There was that poor lady that died there was a train that hit them when they were filming on the train tracks years ago. That caused a big issue out here. There's been a lot of issues with production abusing PAs, making them sit in vehicles for days on end and not letting them leave to go to the bathroom. Or it's just some stuff, especially on the bigger budget, but it goes to their heads. And they don't think that they're working with human beings. It's like, well, would you treat your family like that? No, you wouldn't. So don't treat other people like that. So we have to make that judgment call. And you try to do it with a smile, and you try to do the best you can. And you try to give them options and say, hey, just let you know, if this happens, it's not going to shoot today. Not because I don't want it to, but this will happen or that will happen. But here's how I can adjust it, or here's how we can fix it. And let me know. If not, it'll cost you extra money and you might injure your actor. So you need to take this seriously.
Yeah, well, it's also good that there are people like yourself who are working in the industry who have that mentality about themselves and understand that, especially the importance of when you're dealing with other people, to just be safe.
Yeah, and I think it's spreading more. And I'm not saying that other people don't care. They always care to a degree. But when people are stressed out and we're way behind and we only have this location for so long, or this is more important, or we've got to do this explosive scene because we just got this camera in and we don't have it for long, or whatever. You understand that. But it's up to the production team to make sure they let everybody know that, I think. And that's where the assistant director and the first AD and other people come in. But in the end, we're all just people. We're everybody's son and daughter and brother and sister, and you want them to go home to their family, and you want everybody to have good memories as much as you can. And I am incredibly proud of the creature effects industry out here and the makeup artists that do their work and the hairstylists, because I have never met anyone that doesn't care about that person that sits in that chair. And you see the care in which, Patrick would deal with the performers, and you hope it goes upstream and other people care as much, but sometimes you got to point things out. And then you have to make a decision. Is this going to be a job killer for me?
True.
And well, yeah, it might be, but I don't care.
Exactly. And Vic, was there any other questions that you had at all?
And you guys see I wore my Godzilla crew shirt.
There you go.
I'm wearing a Taco Bell shirt.
One second, let me find my hat real quick.
Yeah,
there it is.
Oh, there you go. I've got my bomber jacket too from the production, but I keep that in the closet.
Actually, I'm looking to buy one of those. I found one on eBay.
You should. They're awesome. I think the style is a little outdated, but maybe it'll come back on style.
You have to be the one to trailblaze.
That's right.
From time to time.
They are cool though. It says Godzilla. It's got Godzilla on the back. They had
anything else from chat, Zim?
I think it was one other question someone had. It was another mask question. It was would using latex gloves and face mask be better when handling the foam latex brittle items better than handling with bare hands and no face mask?
Well, face mask, it doesn't really matter. But the hands, not because of safety to you, but because of safety to the foam, which is, I think, what they mean anyway. When you touch keys or change or things that are copper or nickel, you can actually affect the foam and cause it to discolor, as well as to maybe break down a little faster. So you should in general, but it all depends, as long as you clean your hands, because there are oils on your hands. So especially if it's a historical artifact like what you have, Victor, if you took that out of the case or whatever and wanted to touch it, that's fine. But I would always keep that away from direct sunlight and as airtight as possible, and just keep it safe. They can last for decades and decades longer. I mean, I've seen, pieces that were in great shape. I've used material that's been in my lab for years that sat on a shelf and was dealing with, Los Angeles heat and sun and everything, and it still runs. I can run foam latex. It's been sitting around for a decade, as long as it's not solid or clumped up. But even if it's clumped, you can potentially strain it and so on. But yeah, I have some other pieces, like I said, that are crunchy and crumbling. So I try to keep those, airtight and in a dark shelf until I can figure out, what I want to do with them.
One other thing I wanted to ask too is, would temperature matter at all to like putting them in like freezers or anything, or fridges?
Well, I don't know about freezers. I don't think that would hurt it. I could be wrong, but I don't think that would hurt it. But heat could foam latex, run foam latex. Yeah, it could definitely it will definitely cause it to degrade faster.
Gotcha. No, that's awesome. I think that is also all the questions we have from chat too. And to close up, any final statements you'd want to give to like anyone who's watching right now, or once the stream is fully uploaded, the sort of like either guiding philosophies or like takeaways you'd want to give?
Well, I mean, check out legendsmakeup.com if you're interested in learning more about this in regards to turning it into a career. Check out my Instagram, Joyner Studio. And if anybody has any other questions, they can easily send me a message, either contact Victor or me through my Instagram or Facebook, or info@joynerstudio.com email. Don't let anyone discourage you if you want to do this, because I've heard it. I've interviewed thousands of students over the decades. And I've even had parents in my office with their kids insulting their kids right in front of me and insulting the school and thinking it's a joke. And I've had to turn on the parents in front of the kids and read them the riot act. I don't give a shit. If you don't want to send your kid here, go get the fuck out. In fact, why don't you leave and let me talk to your kid? I've done that many times. Not that I enjoy doing that, but I take my job very seriously. I take my passion very seriously. And just because we're doing something that's awesome and fun and you regret not making that choice doesn't mean you should fuck up your kid's future because of that. But it is a difficult industry because it's a lot of work, a lot of practice. It's independent contracting a lot of the time. So you might, when jobs dry up because of whatever reason, because we have, waves where you've seen with movies coming out, right? There's a whole bunch of this, whole bunch of zombie movies, a whole bunch of kaiju and all, if there's nothing available, you got to get another job. Go get a job at Walmart. I don't care. It's not anything to be embarrassed about. Paying the bills and having a job is an incredible thing to be able to provide for yourself and your family, regardless of where it's coming from. So, just be prepared for that. Don't be jealous of other people that you may know or be friends with, and they get wonderful jobs and you think they're not that talented or they're jerks or whatever. Well, what you should do is become a better friend to them, and hopefully they'll hire you or recommend you. Not saying be fake or cheap, but don't walk around being bitter and saying things about people. That gets you nowhere. There are people out here like that, and I steer clear of them. I prefer being around people that are positive and love what they do. And I love what I do, and I wouldn't change it at any point. And it's awesome that something you worked on, that creates a fan base and has a special place in people's hearts. That not a lot of people can say that. And that's really cool. I've had people tattoo their bodies with my work, and I'm just blown away by that. So I understand it. I'm a fan. I think everybody, most of the people, probably 95% of the people that work out here are fans. You get some people that become lifers and they just do it for a paycheck and they don't care about the project and, whatever. But I think most every sculptor is a huge fan, painters, and they put that love into the work they do. Dave Grasso, Jose Fernandez, Mark Maitre, Tom Flouts, Steve Wang, Gino Acevedo, Patrick Toplish, Jack Garber, Rick Lazzarini, Rick Baker. And then I'm a huge fan of the history of our industry, because if we don't collect that information and teach it to the new generation, it's not going to be out there. So I if someone's interested about this stuff, I want them to go back and learn about Charlie Gamora, the Ape Suit King. I want them to learn about Jack Pierce, created all the Universal monsters. I want them to learn about Mari Cederman, some of the beautiful prosthetic work. When Orson Welles would do movies, he would always have a fake nose made for himself because he hated his nose. And Maurice made all of his nose. The script didn't call for it. I need to know.
I never knew that. Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. On my Facebook, I just posted a whole article from 1978 from a film magazine interviewing Maurice about that. But he designed vinyl foam back in the freaking 30s, before Wizard of Oz. I mean, and Charlie Gomorrah was a chemical guy. That's how they made a lot of their money back then, was they sold they patented a lot of their designs and sold them to toy companies and medical companies. So, I mean, and Charlie Gomorrah if you ever saw War of the Worlds, the original, right? Orson Welles. That's Charlie Gomorrah who did that Alien. And he brought his 14-year-old daughter on set, and they built that thing, and it was amazing. And she was underneath the boards in the barn when the alien was in there, and she was operating the creature was amazing. Headlights for eyes, and it actually had bladders for veins because you see them pumping with the hand. And he rushed it to set, and the plaster bandages were still wet because that was what they instead of using fiberglass, they were using plaster bandage, and it was still wet when they had it on set because they had to make changes and adjustments. And there's like Chris Mueller sculpted for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. One of my favorite movies, the List of Adrian Messenger. I highly recommend people look for that. It's on YouTube. It has all these great actors, big actors like Kirk Douglas, and it's black and white. I think it's from the early 60s, but I could be wrong. Could be mid 60s, not sure. I don't think it's the 50s, but and they're all wearing prosthetics in the movie. And at the they never take them off. They're that character. Then at the end of the film, during the credits, they come out and pull off the prosthetics. Brilliant. And they had all these great people working on it. I mean, learn who just all these wonderful people are, and the history of it, and how we got to where we are today. We're standing on the shoulders of the legends and the greats that came before us. So treat it with respect, treat it with honor, and appreciate your fans, and keep creating.
Of course. And of course, everyone knows where my channel is since I'm hosting. But Vic, you want to say where everyone can find you, my man?
You can find me on Twitter as always at G98 Appreciator or Crispy Vic. I'll be posting art updates, fun facts about 98. Just all around kaiju stuff, And I guess since we're closing off, let me just thank Lee Joyner again for coming on, letting me interview you.
My pleasure. Thank you for hosting. Appreciate it.
From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Your work changed my life. And,
you're too sweet.
All the more
and I hope I didn't piss off too many people in the industry with my stories, but I trust me, I was really trying to, rein it in as much as I could. But awesome. I hope
that was great.
I hope I can create something else that people end up loving, because that's the unexpected side effect of what we do, where you get into it as a fan. And you're just happy to be here, but then you get into that same position. Not saying I am, but I've had that happen, where people come up to you and go, wow, I love your work, or I've seen it before. I'm still surprised that people come up to me like you, Vic, and they go, oh, it's like, how do you know who I am? I mean, what, I'm just some, punk from Alabama. I'm surprised I made it through childhood with all the fires I started and the cars I wrecked, and growing up in the 70s and the 80s is a lot different than growing up now. And if I can come out here from Alabama pre-internet days, I mean, anybody can do it. Come on. And if anybody has any questions, like I said, hit me up on Instagram or contact Victor. And
totally, I would love to have you on for another live stream like this.
Yeah,
and then you can go a little bit even more unhinged. Trust me, this is literally you've been given full license by me. So like everything that you say reflects on me. So they'd be like, he told me to send it. He's the producer here.
Yeah, no, I'll get somebody else. Like, hey, if you guys need any sculpting, yeah, we saw that podcast you did. You're too much of a
Be like, no, it was the kid. He did it.
We should do one about Mimic. I know it's not a kaiju, but
no, trust me, I would love to do more stuff outside of kaiju.
Because I think that's a very underrated film. I have the storyboards, and I have the original creature design sheets and pictures and all this stuff. Like I said, I even have things from it that don't exist anymore, I don't think. There was a lot of great stories. They should have let the Weinsteins should have just backed off and let him do what he does best, but they didn't. He was this young, up and coming director. I think he'd only done maybe 2 or 3, Mexican films before then. With Ron Perlman was in one of them, I think, which is why he used Ron for a lot of his movies. But oh my God, there was a scene. The little boy. There's the autistic kid that does the funny shoes with the spoons. In the original story, he dies. He gets ripped apart. He's in the church across the street. He had gone over there, and he's naked. You don't see it because of the way they shoot it. And he's covered in blood. And he's standing in front of the stained glass window with light shining through it from behind him. And the Judas bugs are coming at him from the sides. And he raises his arms in a Christ pose. And they attack him and destroy him.
Oh, wow.
Couldn't show that to American audiences, I guess.
That's true, yeah.
Was that filmed?
Yeah, was that filmed at all or no?
No, I don't think it was ever filmed. I could be wrong, but I remember it in the storyboards. Because when Rick brought us all in, that was an R&D moment. Because usually it's the sculptors that come in for the R&D, on our end, because we're, we have to do the maquettes and we have to plan things out, and the mechanics are doing their thing and we're doing our thing, and then you bring in the mold makers and the foam runners and the painters and all that. But yeah, I remember going in Rick's conference room and he had all the storyboards up on the wall, and we were just blown away by it. I mean, blown away. And Guillermo's a makeup artist. He's a creature guy, and he came in and hung out with us most of the time. We had these Macedonian hissing cockroaches that we were breeding in the sculpting room, and we'd use them as reference. And he was a huge comic book fan, and we would just talk about shit all day, and he'd laugh. And same with Rob Bottin when he came in. He was just a big giant hippie wearing tie-dye and shorts and Birkenstocks. And yeah, it's weird. It's almost like you have a feeling of power when you're doing that with these people. You just can't believe it. And these guys are just so normal and so cool. And, it gives you a lot of people to look up to in regards to, hey, if they could do that, I could do that. Not because you're good, but just because this guy's just a guy. Coming out and meeting all your heroes and becoming friends with them. It's weird because it takes away that fear I think you have of meeting famous people, especially when you're working with actors and directors. They're just people,
Yeah.
So it definitely changes your approach. I never would have been able to go up to people, I think, before I got into this industry. I just couldn't, at conventions or, but there's been very few people I've met that, when they say never meet your heroes, it's been a couple, but 95% again with that number have been awesome, and I would work with them again. And yeah, so sorry, I think I've made this go way much longer than you guys thought.
No, trust me, no, you're good. Like hearing you speak, it's awesome, and it just means it's more reason for you to come back on for another stream and go
I'd love
the
to.
hinges.
Oh my God.
However, before we do end, a few of my other friends who are 98 fans, they wanted you to say, since like another name that 98 had on the set was Fred, they wanted you to say, yeah, apparently.
Well, we had a guy in the lab named Fred that was funny as hell, and it might have been because of him. I can't remember his last name. He's a bald guy. I think he was in the mechanical department, but I can't remember. But he was always joking around with other people. But what did they want me to say? What?
Could you say "In Fred We Trust" to end off the stream?
Well, to end this wonderful stream and this conversation, and I had a lot of fun. And thank you everybody for joining us. We're honored that you came here, and it's just awesome. And hopefully you'll play this when you're working on a sculpture in the future or making some monsters. Just have it in the background. You can listen to my dulcet tones. It'll put you to sleep. But in Fred we trust.
Of course. Thank you very much. And Fred, we trust. You all have a wonderful night. Thank you all for being amazing guests. Have a good one, folks.
Thank you, guys.
Yep.